Hey, it's Brooklyn Lou the Skeptic. That was really cool. Got a new introduction. Loving it. Very modern. Very cool. So, welcome to my live. I want to open up my channel to all forms of discussion, particularly religious ones. That's the thrust of my channel is atheism, skepticism, critical thinking, but I definitely like to open it up to all kinds of thoughts. Let's see what's going on in my stream. Brock, how you doing? Global Michba Network. How are you? Glad to see you. Let me get this stream link in there. Today is new for me because it is the first day that I am actually monetized, and I don't know how super chats work. I'm assuming they're on my YouTube channel, but I'm on StreamYard, and it goes direct live to YouTube. So kind of experimenting to see how all that works. But welcome in. That's my link. Hey, Reverend Rosado, how are you? Glad to see you. Change your account. So anyway, anyone want to chat? Could type in the link, or you could come on in through that link. Like to talk to one or two people at a time. Also looking for a moderator. Really not exactly sure how that works, but oh, Reverend, you can come right in. You know I'm very disorganized and just kind of wing it. So, Reverend Rosado, you can come on in and we could chat a little while about anything. You can pick the subject or pick up on our last conversation. Either way is fine. Hey, Dux Y, how are you? Nice to see you tonight. There he is. The Reverend Gilberto Rosado. This is Aramita. Hey, Reverend, how you doing?
Fantastic, sir.
Good. You sound great tonight.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic day. I'm getting a little feedback here. Trying to figure out why. Okay. I think that settles that. Okay, well, today, how you doing, Lou and everyone? I wanted to revisit where we last left off and to go over things that I did the experiment, so to speak.
Yes, I did the experiment.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back into that, and I wanted to. I'm sorry, but we got kids here that are trying to get settled.
I hear them.
Yeah, you hear them, right? Are you? You're able to show a full screen if I share a.
If
an
you
image.
put one in there, I should be able to pop it right up.
Okay, I can change my screen here, but and then you can make it bigger so people can see it, right?
I think I could pull it in right with us.
Yeah, because I don't use StreamYard. I don't know how it works. So, but
Mm.
anyway, that's what I'll try to do later on. But in the beginning, yeah, well, we're gonna use it now. I need to find the file here. So let me. You can talk about what you again to remind people what the experiment was, so that and give me a chance to get my file ready.
All right. So me and Reverend were talking about prayer. I I offered a test of prayer, which was very simply I would pray. I also asked him to pray, and I asked one other person in the stream who was a Christian to pray. Not sure if they did, but I know I did. And what I prayed was that if God was real, he would show himself to me by doing something real. And in my prayer, it was actually to make my laptop dysfunctional by the next morning. So I asked God to shut off my laptop permanently so that when I went to boot up in the morning, it would not be functional. Um, that did not happen. So, as far as I'm concerned, God failed that test, and I'm on that laptop right now.
Okay, so and I had told you that what you were asking was not the right way to go about it, right? So and I wanted to show you. I don't know what your stance on AI is. What's your stance on AI?
Uh, Boy, I don't know what you mean by stance. I believe it's something that's going on right now, and I
Right.
believe it's essentially a lot of information, and it's being used in both good and bad ways, I guess.
Right.
So, but I don't know what you mean by stance. I mean, I
Well,
know.
that you would accept what it says about, and what I'm going to do is what it says about scientific experimentation.
Oh,
So
you're
just
talking about like search results?
no,
Because I
it's
accept search results, but
yeah. Well,
AI,
what it says scientific
like,
scientific testing, what it should involve, right?
right? But I'm saying AI is essentially because I am definitely not like big on AI, but it's
Right.
basically a search engine, isn't it? Like essentially, like Chat
Well,
GPT
it,
or
it
Grok.
if you want to look at it basically, it is a search engine that is a calculator, basically. And so it is the best way to use it is to align your questioning, your search, as closely as possible to some type of mathematical um, uh, you know uh, process, as close as you can get to it. And like saying 2 plus 2 equals 4. So basically, if you frame your questions where it's very good, like for comparison. And we're going to compare A to B. As you understand, already we're looking at a mathematical formula, right? A compared to B. So the AI is very good with that. It's very good with calculations, and
Okay,
very good with comparing A and B, and then even a C, or extrapolating C from A and B, stuff like that. So
but
if you're able,
it's. Am I right that it's essentially taking information that is already known and
but
just
when it's
kind of
calculating, it's not already known, right? When
what do
it's
you mean? Like if it's
calculating,
doing math or something?
right, right. Well, like I said, compare A to B. So that's not typically something that you would find online, or that it would be able to find, especially if what you're talking about is something novel. But so that's where you see the strength of the AI, because then it will extrapolate, it will calculate, you know, if A equals B, then what would C be? So it can do that. It's not referring to any website for that. It is calculating that for itself.
Like
So
a
that,
computer would calculate.
yes, well, like a calculator, basically. Like I
Yeah.
say, you can go very basic,
All
but
right. So
again, yeah, it is original in that sense. So it's not depending on a website to give you those extrapolations, because they could be very original to you, right? It could be a new idea that you're presenting.
okay. So let's see what you have.
Yeah, go ahead, say that again. I'm sorry.
Let's see what you have.
Oh, okay, yeah. So basically, though, with the experimentation, I'm not going to show it on the computer screen. I'm just showing you that I have it here as on the phone, and I'll read a certain part of it.
Okay,
And what we're
that'd be
talking
fine.
about, yeah, if you're going to, is to be transparent. I don't want people to not know what we're doing. So, if you're going to do an experiment, and in this case, you were trying to replicate what I had said that I had done.
No.
So,
I want to clarify that.
okay,
I
go ahead.
really wasn't I really wasn't trying to replicate what you did. I was making up my own test, unique to me.
Okay,
I
but
mean,
based.
that's what I intended to do.
All right. So now, if and I'm going to tell you what you did is what I call religion, because
Okay.
that's what religion does. You did a typical religious uh, a religious thing by doing
Yeah.
that, because again, you did it according to your view.
Yes, I
You
did it because that's all I know is my thinking.
so
I
it's
didn't
that's
do it
very
according to
good.
someone else's thinking.
But you did it according to your regular thinking,
Yes,
human thought process.
absolutely. Of course.
Okay. So, but that's where religion, that's what makes religion what it is. And it also is the reason why there are so many religions out there. Is
Absolutely. And
because,
that we agree on.
okay. So, but the issue here was not to rediscover a religion or to create our own religion. The thing was, the reason you did that was because I had made the statements of my own experience. Okay. And so you wanted to have your own test, but in your way. And what I'm saying is that for a person like you're an atheist or an agnostic, atheistic agnostic, however you want to put it, but your strength, your forte, your main argument is, or leaning is, on science. And so I'm amazed that you, instead of going through the scientific method,
Mhm.
you opted for a religious method.
Well,
So
let me say this. All right. When we did that, I didn't really think it through all that deeply. It was off the cuff. All right. It
right.
was in, I know, I consider it kind of fun, but I do take issue with prayer, because I don't see that prayer ever does anything real. I mean, and that was a way for me to offer a test. I think it's valid. I mean, why wouldn't it be valid if God is gonna do something real? I asked him if he would please do something real. I said I would follow him all the days of my life if he did something real in my life. Wasn't talking about other people's lives, and he didn't do anything. And I mean, is there anything wrong with my conclusion that he didn't do anything?
Well, because I had told you that in my case he did do something. Wasn't that
Yes.
the premise?
No, wasn't I wasn't really going back to you. I can't. He might have done something for you. I wasn't really picking on that. I mean, honestly,
Okay.
Rev,
All
I
right.
wasn't picking on that. I was saying
Right.
that I would run a test of my own to see if maybe he would do something for me.
Right. But why would you expect him to do something for you if the probably the only person that you know of that is saying that he had something, that God did something for him, you're not copying the method that in my case that I did. You understand? If you're into science
Yeah, you're
and
saying I am not. I definitely didn't copy your exact methodology. So
right,
I am, I concede that. What I was doing was a very general test of my own. All right. And I don't see why that test that I did would be invalid for me. I mean, I mean, people pray every day, right? All over the world, people are praying. They're praying to different gods, but there's many people praying to the Christian God. All right, that's just true, right? That's factual. A lot of people praying every day. I've never seen a demonstration of God answering these prayers in any way that is objectively testable. And that may be considered scientific or you know so to me, if he's answering prayers, it's just purely random if he's doing it at all. I mean, am I wrong with saying that? I mean, if he's answering prayers, isn't it just random at the very, at best it's just random. He'll choose one person somewhere and say, I'll answer your prayer. And then a lot of other people, he says, no, I won't answer yours. Am I saying something wrong there, Rev?
not wrong, but it's the perspective. You have the perspective of someone looking at it from our point of view. But in the divine perspective, God is the one who everything's done according to God's will. And
Yeah.
if you look at the Bible, you see Jesus at often he would look up to the heavens, before performing a miracle. He would look up first because, and not that he needed to do that, in terms of certain theologies, he was God incarnate. Why would he do that? But like I've always said, most of the stuff in the Bible is for teaching. It really isn't that it was necessary, but it's necessary for instruction. So what Jesus is showing is that everything is done according to the Father's will. That's what he was absolutely reinforcing there.
Okay.
Now, so the issues of when God does this or that is really not just based on prayer, but it's based on God's will uh,
Okay.
in any given moment. So it's never just because you prayed that's going to happen. It's
Can you
all
change God's will in prayer?
and the will of God is what the will of God is.
So
Now
you can't change it. I mean,
no,
I
I'm
don't
not
think
saying
you can, but
God
tell me
changed.
if you
God
think you
does what
can.
He wants to do. I don't think it's ever a changing.
So
Is
then
like
what in the world would somebody pray? And if God already knows what he's going to do and it's in his will, you have no chance of changing that. So
no,
why
there, there's
bother?
there's always leeway. That's why there's always leeway. But again, what is the purpose of God? What's God's purpose? And God's purpose
We
is
know.
that a person grows, that a person becomes more in tune with the spiritual things opposed to the physical things. Okay, so there are times where God will make you wait. You're waiting and waiting. To God, time is of no wait. God is eternal, so it's not an issue of time for God. But if it's an issue of waiting till Lou is ready, it's at a point where he can then digest responsibly what's going to happen, then that's what God is going to do. And again, there's things that may be optional if you get there or you don't get there. You don't ever get there, or whenever you do get there. So there is leeway in the things that God does, and prayer is for our benefit. It's not for God's benefit. God doesn't need our prayer, but we need
I
the prayer.
wouldn't understand why he would. I mean, if he
Right,
already knows what he's going to do, why would he need you to advise him?
right. But he does. We does ask that each of us grow in Him, spiritually speaking. So it's like a father, a parent. You want to give your children gifts, but sometimes we want them to earn a gift because it's
Yeah,
for
but
their own.
there's some differences here. Like
Yeah,
if a physical child that you have, that is your child, comes to you and pleads with you, you might change your mind. You might decide to do something differently. Okay, that's very possible with human beings. But if God's will is set, and the Bible seems to be clear it is set, at least in a lot of different theological understandings, then you praying is not going to change his mind. All right. It's just going to maybe you will get some revelation. I mean, I'm going to say that is possible,
that's
but
absolutely
it's not going to be changing an outcome.
right.
No outcome is going to be changed.
Well, that all depends. If the outcome is the option, see, what you never know. You never know what is optional and what isn't. Right? That you don't know. So you're taking a chance, let's say, by not praying because we'll just leave it up to God's will. And whenever we pray, we should always say, I say, God, if it's your will. We always say, if it's your will.
What
Right.
doesn't it seem, okay? This boggles my mind, because for me, that process of going to a God who already knows exactly what he's going to do and petitioning him to see things a certain way or to do something in particular that he may not do because it's already set in stone, seems quite useless. And it seems like it would be an annoying process. Like I am glad I don't do that anymore, because
Right.
I don't see any purpose in that.
Right. Because again, the purpose of God is that we grow spiritually. So there's always a purpose in prayer. How much of that it makes a difference, only God really knows, right? Because you don't actually know if it was always God's plan that you would be praying and that He would heal you or do whatever. You don't know that. So again, it doesn't matter. Doing for you or not doing for you is always going to be potentially God's will at any given moment. Oh, of course it is, but I'm saying pre-planned. It was always going to happen. But what was going to happen was also that you were going to pray for it, right? So that's also part of it, isn't it? But God would know that you would pray for it, and then that would be okay, because nothing else down the road is dependent on that. It's an option. But then again, maybe it isn't just an option, but a necessity. That also is true. It can be true, right?
Well,
So
let me ask you this, okay? And I want to be brief, because I got a couple of people wanting to come in that I've been talking to, and one is going to probably have a friendly debate with. I see you, Objective Ethics, and that would be fun. But let me ask you this: are you aware? And I'm assuming you are, because you're well read. The one thing wonderful about some of the people coming in my chat is they're pretty educated people. All right. So are you aware of the Templeton study on prayer that was done, I think, in
Yeah, you
2006?
mentioned it before. I did a lot of reading on those things.
Okay, so what we have there, I mean, what we see is a research study done on prayer, and it didn't study everything, but it was particular to outcomes in a physical illness situation. All right.
Right.
It took like a whole bunch of people, had people prayed for, and other people, let's say, not prayed for. And there was no statistical difference. So I'm not saying that is conclusive on every type of prayer and every situation, but it certainly proves that in healing, healing people, there's no benefit that we can quantify to praying for anybody. And I would
Right.
say that's the reason why when you get sick, you probably go to a doctor. All right. When people who are Christian get sick, they go to a doctor because I don't even think they think that God is going to actually change the outcome because
Okay, but the problem
he
with that
doesn't
is that
change the outcome.
if the Bible says that if God doesn't do anything, man can do. So that's the number one rule about that. If a man can do it, God won't do it. So yes, if it's simple, if you got a cold and you can take some cough medicine, then do it, because the basic line is, why aren't you doing what you know that you can do? So again, it's an issue of teaching. It's an issue of this already man has discovered. Do what use the tools and learning that man has acquired to do that. That the God doesn't need to be doing that, right? So again, we see that that is a frivolous prayer, and one that would go unanswered, because it's like, God, tie my shoe. If God ties my shoe, then I'll believe. It's ridiculous. Because
Well,
the bottom line is that you can tie your own shoe. Why do you need
yeah,
God to tie?
but here's the thing, Reverend.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be ridiculous to pray that. Although, if God was real, it would not be ridiculous, because if he was real and actually existed, he could possibly tie your shoe.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
then what is the point? If a child could tie my shoe, what
Okay.
is the point to that?
Okay, you might not be able to tie your shoe, like in the example of sick people in hospitals, right? There's sick people who are not able to heal themselves, and there's sick people who the doctors have already tried to heal, but they were unable to do it. And it would be nice and it would be impressive again if there was a section of the hospital where a group of Christians were hanging out and they would pray for those specific cases, and it was demonstrated that God did something. But we
Yeah,
don't have any
but that
such example of that.
because God doesn't want that. You're trying to force God to play your game, to prove, yes, to prove something for you, when God is doing the opposite. And it's not because I say,
If God doesn't want to prove himself to me, and he doesn't want to be detectable to me, and he wants to stay invisible to me, I have no reason to pay attention to him.
okay, because you're ignoring the conceptual validity of God. The invitation that God makes is that you have faith, and I don't mean blind faith, so I'll explain what that is, but that you have faith so that salvation can be had. That's the basic premise in the theology. So, God would be deserving us to be open and reveal himself openly, because that will not give us salvation. It won't. You think it will, but it won't. And I remind you of the example I gave, which is a big one, was that Lucifer and his fallen angels, they were with God. There was no issue. Is God real, or does God exist? That was not an issue. And yet we have the devil and the fallen angel. They rebelled against God.
Mhm.
That's the
That's
real issue. And
that's something
that's what
written
God
in
is
a book.
addressing. That's what God is addressing. Yeah, but now you want to ignore the comic book talking about the Superman and want to discuss Superman and judge Superman without the comic book. That is the problem with that argument that you went to just
Okay,
now.
but I did
So
but
come
I
on.
did
We're going to
read the
talk about the
Bible,
God of the Bible. Then we need to talk about the Bible
but
because those are the points.
I have read the Bible. I
Okay.
haven't read Superman comics, but I have read the Bible. Okay. And, the God of the Bible, other than being a story, has never done anything in real life, in my life, that has demonstrated that he is real. All right. He's not real. And I don't
Because
believe
he
in
is not
things that are not real.
real. I already explained to you that he cannot show you a lie. You are, again, that's the religious part of you. You are religious. Any atheist is religious because you are demanding a straw man God, and you're believing that God is the straw man figure that has to prove himself to be real, which is not what God is. And I
Well,
explained that to you. Let me show you the graphic, because the graphic will help you get that understanding a little bit. So let me show you, and you can blow it up for your audience so that they can see it.
let me see it.
Okay, so if you look at this graphic, this circle here, you see it down here, maybe a little difficult for you to
I
see.
can't really do anything with it, but it's
Yeah,
there.
don't worry about it, right? But if you can see, this is says physical universe, and I also have universes here, because it doesn't matter. Whatever is a thing, whatever is a reality, an existence, is that circle that you see there. Everything is there. Everything is there. What the Bible is saying is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created everything. That circle that you see there on the lower left hand side, and might be on the right hand side on your screen, that is what God created in the beginning. And all we're saying is that you are demanding that God be a part of that physical universe. And it's like demanding that an author of a book be part of the book that he wrote, or that the Bach be part of the music that he wrote.
Well, I'm gonna state clearly what I'm thinking, and then you could come back another time and tell me where my thinking is wrong. Okay. All right. I am not thinking that God, if he's outside of space and time, if he's not a thing, right, and he's outside of space and time, what I am saying, Reverend, is that doesn't mean anything to me. That's what I'm saying. So, someone might say, "Oh, that means everything." They could see clearly. But for me, when someone says there's a being, a spirit, some sort of concept that's outside of space and time, that either goes above my head, which is possible, I may not be able to comprehend these things, or it is the same as something not existing. So that's my point. It's not that people don't think of God. I know that people think of God. People pray to God. But if people pray to God and nothing happens that can be demonstrated, it's a pointless exercise to me. I mean, and honestly, I used to pray when I was a Christian, and now I don't pray. I haven't prayed until that day with you. Okay. And I don't miss prayer. I mean, every day goes by. I don't go, oh my gosh, I miss prayer. I don't miss prayer at all, because prayer to me shows itself to be really a waste of my time and energy.
Right.
So that's
But
kind of where I'm coming from. It's
but
not.
if you're praying the way you did that the other day, and how many people who are religious do, there will be nothing there. But that's not what I've come to speak about, and it's not what I told you about in our first discussion. What I was talking about is an interactive personal relationship with God, not a religious belief, which what most people have. What you had, because you admit to it that you had a religious belief, and that's not what I was talking about. From an early age, I never had a religious belief. I
You had a
had
relationship with what?
with the God of the Bible, and I
So you had a
already
relationship. Let's be real. You
yes,
didn't have a relationship with a thing. You didn't have a relationship with something that exists. We've already discussed that. You
right.
had a relationship with a book.
No, no. Remember that I told you that in my experiment, that things happen that would be unexplainable unless, and even I did the test with the AI. I asked the AI also if something happens to in a complexity, and what would that mean? And the AI came back and said that somebody made the influence happen. Okay, so even the AI agreed that the experience that I have and had, and that early one, that first one, it meant that somebody else had to have done those things. And in the case that there was no one else, it was something or some being, and it was intelligent. And that was the conclusion that the AI came to, given the parameters that I gave it, which was that it was private prayer, it was silent, no one heard it. It was future, what was being prophesied, and that wasn't my own doing. It was the God of the Bible who said that next week XYZ will happen in certain very very unique circumstances, which would otherwise be impossible, and involved other people. It wasn't my doing, my influence, or nothing like that. And all of what God said that would happen, it happened to a T. And when I put it through the AI said that in those conditions, then that would have to be considered evidence or proof that another being did indeed talk or speak, prophesied, and cause those things to occur.
So
So again,
you set the AI. You instructed the AI. Okay. When you say that God spoke to you, or God told you something, and then you prayed later on, all right. I don't believe God spoke to you. I believe that you had thoughts. I believe that that's it.
so my thoughts created this complex thing that happened the following week. Is that what you're saying? Because the AI would
Thoughts.
disagree with you wholeheartedly. That is
Well,
not
I'm
possible.
just saying. I'm just saying
That's not real, Lou. What you're
when
saying is not
Christians tell
real.
me that
It
God
doesn't
spoke
exist.
to them, when Christians tell me that God spoke to them, all right, I don't buy it anymore. I want to be shown and demonstrated that God spoke, because all I get when I think of all the people, and I've talked to thousands, and I was a Christian, and I spoke with thousands of Christians when I was a Christian. And all I ever heard God spoke was a claim that God spoke. Never did I see a demonstration of God speaking. So call me, I don't want to believe. That's not true. I want to believe things that are real. All right. I don't doubt that people think that God speaks to them. I'm sure people think that God speaks to
I'm
them.
sure many do,
Right?
but they're not. It's not truthful. So I'm
Yes.
the first one to tell you that. But again, you're
Well,
talking about
but
the religious thinkers out there, religious
well,
believers.
how would I determine if God spoke to anybody?
For
How would I
yourself,
determine
just like I did. I did it to confirm for myself, for myself. You see, that's what I did. But
that? Okay,
most
but
of you atheists don't want to do that
I did it
because
the other day. I prayed to
no, you
God.
didn't. You did not do what I told you had to be done. You did religious thing. You did the religious thing, and which I tell you is false. And even you know that, but yet you did that. You didn't do the
Is
scientific thing,
is
which
prayer
was to
religious?
replicate my experiment. Replicate.
Is
And if you look
prayer
at the
religious?
AI, if you look at the AI, it says replication isn't just about repeating, it's about testing reliability. And that's what you want, but yet you didn't do that. If the original results were valid, they should hold under identical conditions. Again, I did the scientific methodology, but no atheist is willing to do it. I'm making a general statement. You until you're able or willing, I should say, to replicate the conditions, then you really, by saying that no, it's not possible, it can't be, it's just denial. That's all. It's not an
Okay,
atheism. It's just
so
simply denial
so
because
till
you're
the
not
next
willing to do the
time,
science.
we speak,
All right.
I'll give you a little homework. You put together a test that will be your test that I could do. All right, that would get me a result of God doing something in reality.
Yeah, but you're not listening. It has to be yours. It has to be yours. And I don't know your heart or your mind. There's no way for that to be done by me. But by you, it can be. Why don't you want to experiment yourself directly, but replicate the conditions that I have spoken that are the ones necessary for this to happen?
Okay,
That's the
so
point.
so
Everyone
so
doesn't have this. All of the religions in the world don't have this, right? But then that's why they all insist that God exists, and they're wrong.
okay,
I'm
so
the
so
only one
till
who told you that saying that God doesn't exist is correct. I'm the only one, but I'm also the only one that's telling you that God is, and that God did do for me prove to me that He is. You see, I'm
okay,
the
let
only
me
one. So then at least follow the experiment.
okay. Listen, I'm gonna go, but
Okay, I'll let you go.
I want next time for you to run through the exact thing that you did that I could duplicate, and then we'll see if I get a result that
It,
way.
it's not going to be that you can duplicate. What's going to happen? I'm going to put it. It's in the documentary. I'm putting it in the documentary, and when it's released, then you'll go and review it. But what I told you last week is what still is. It will be God will be make it very clear to you when He is doing whatever in your life. It will happen that way, not on your time, not on your terms, nothing like that.
It
But
sounds to me
God
like the
will be
only
with
thing that could happen, it sounds to
no,
me like the only thing that could happen is I can change my mind. And
it's not
yes, I
about
can change
changing your
my
mind,
mind.
just simply. Paul was on his way. Saul of Tarsus was on his way on the road when something knocked him off his horse and on his rear end. And that was, and God dealt with him directly. And that's
That
when Saul became Paul.
that is
And
a story.
it's a story. I know it's a story, but it's a story that is replicated many times in many people's lives. Okay, so that is the issue here. You can't say that this Jew, this a high Jew, all of a sudden turns around and becomes a Christian, but at that time was the worst thing to do or to be. So something had to happen. And for all the disciples to give their life up for something that wasn't, as you would put it, real, is very unlikely.
People
So
give their lives for things that are not real all the time.
all the
It's not
time.
unusual. It's not
Oh,
unusual at all.
all right. So again, like I said,
All right,
at,
you are old enough to remember Guyana. I am. I lived through that. I saw it. Was reading about it when it happened. People gave their lives to something that was not true. Something they believed, but it was not true. That phenomenon of people giving their lives for things that are not true is kind of usual for human beings.
but not for Jews. The Jews have very strict instruction. They're raised from birth. None of the people in Guyana were raised from birth in whatever they were believing in. So the issue is still different. You're comparing apples and oranges. It is a different thing. So these Jews were real Jews born in Judaism, and that's what they knew was Judaism. For them to, so to speak, abandon that for a different Messiah, for a thing that was different, challenge that present day, at that time, their present day belief system. That is remarkable. That was totally remarkable. And
Well,
it was
here's
with all the persecution that they went through, they didn't have to go through that.
well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I wanna bring on a couple other people
Go
because
ahead, bring them in. I'm not.
I've
I
been
mean,
I've been waiting. And one thing, there's a fella in the chat that I'm really happy that he came by.
good.
Tavo San Abri. I see you there. And one of the things the Rev was saying that reminds me of something we were talking about in writing, and that is, these claims were different than other people's claims. I don't disagree with that. All claims have idiosyncrasies, all claims are nuanced. My problem is when the claim cannot be verified and cannot be observed and is not something that is real, then that claim has very little validity to me. It
Right.
doesn't matter if it's different than someone else's claim, or maybe it's even a little better than someone else's claim. And maybe it's even philosophically more grounded in some philosophy than someone else's claim. It's still a garbage claim to me.
Right. But what shouldn't be garbage to you is the Webster Dictionary. And we already went through the fact of what real means and what existence means, the circular reasoning that is inherent, and the fact that any God who creates the universe or creates all things cannot be real or existent because of that. So
Well,
I
I think you're, and again, this is one thing we agree upon,
okay,
but I mean,
but
you are outside of the theology that is most common within Christianity. You would be a heretic. So there you go.
because I believe in the Bible, what the Bible said. When
No,
God,
the
but
Bible,
Bible says that God created all things.
yeah, but
All I'm saying is
Christianity is a religion, all right, whether you like it or not.
it's a
Right?
religion. But what
And
I'm
you would be outside of that religion's doctrine and
and
belief
and,
system.
and Jesus Christ was outside Judaism of his day.
Yeah, and it's all a big mess. That's the point.
It's a big mess because you guys are insisting on existence and reality. That's why you continue the big mess because you're not
I
willing to
don't
even
continue
go.
it.
Well, you are part of it. You
No,
don't consider.
I point out
You
the
point out what
messiness
the
of
Webster
recent.
Dictionary, what
No, the
real
mess.
means, and what
I
existence
accept
is, and
I
if
accept
you,
definitions. All right.
but then
I'm
when
pointing out the problems with taking any one of these religious doctrines as being true. All right. It is a problem here.
but
All
there's
right.
no
That's
problem
why.
in testing for yourself, right?
But the whole thing is a big
Okay.
mess.
Well, no, it's not a bit. But for yourself, the individual to seek after God, it's not, that shouldn't be a problem.
No, I make up my own mind. So if God is going to do something to prove himself to me, like I told you last time, I'll come on and say, well, now I believe in God because he did something real, and it was something I can't disavow myself from.
Right.
So
And
that's
so,
it.
but can you do admit that that's what I'm saying about myself? So my
Yes,
experience is that
yes.
way.
But your
You would
experience,
like, and you would like to have that similar experience, and any
yes.
atheist and anyone in the audience can have that experience.
But
Now
your experience is your experience.
right.
Okay, it's not
No,
my
yeah,
experience.
I know
All right.
that, but at least as the scientific method demands, at least if you hear that I was able to develop and counter that relationship, then hear the way I did it and at least at minimum, you should at least try to replicate those conditions, because
The
that's
next
science.
the
That's
next
not
time
religion.
the next time that we speak, and I'd make a whole show just with you alone, and then we could go over what you did, and I could try to replicate what you did.
Well, that'll be in my document. I gotta save something for the documentary. But
But
we
let
can
me.
discuss. But the first thing, really, Lou, and I'll leave it here because I know other people. You can invite other people to start coming in. And I'll back out.
Well,
But
I got someone I've been waiting to talk
oh,
to.
okay. So,
So
like I
let me
said,
bring him in first, and then
yeah, yeah.
I
I'll
wish
fade away.
there's a guy that I really want to talk to. He's a real scholar. I love when I get scholars, people who really study this stuff.
Right.
And Tavo in the stream is actually a real academic.
Right.
So, but let me bring in objective ethics.
People who study
Hey,
religion, that's all they can talk about is religion. And the
he
critique.
doesn't study religion.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not talking about him in person. I'm just saying in general. And the people who study their topics and their academics, that's not experience. That's just, that's book knowledge. So, there has to be a caveat there on that. Now, you guys are speaking in terms of the religious world and the religious history, the majority of religious folks, and that's fine. I understand that. I criticize it myself. Okay, but what I'm talking about is not that. It's totally different. But I've said enough, and we let these your other valid and qualified
objective ethics. Are you there?
in.
I am, brother. How are you doing, Lou? Good to see you, Reverend. So I had my debate. Yeah, I had my debate last.
I've been waiting to talk to you about your debate, and I wanted
you
to run some of it by me, and we could have a short friendly debate, maybe.
Absolutely, we can have a go at it, just as friends, as always. I don't mind at all. The debate was fire. It went extremely well. It was nice to debate against an atheist instead of against Christians for once, because that just gets really old. So I really enjoyed it. He put up a good fight for subjective morality, but he didn't. Yeah, he kind of lost the debate. We'll have to wait for the results to come out from ChatGTP, but he for some reason, I don't know why, he decided to ground subjective morality. He tried to ground his oughts into evolution, which runs into Hume's guillotine. Can't get your I have no idea why he tried to do that. So he kind of shot himself in the foot. Once he did that, I just tried to stay out of his way and just substantiate my own claims. And he also, there's several issues. He didn't bridge any of the gaps that I was able to show, which I'll show you what the gaps are that you need to bridge if you believe in subjective morality. But it's just a friendly conversation between us. I'm going to use the information that I've got because I've studied it, but as far as that goes, we don't have to do like opening statements and cross-examination, all that bullshit. However you want to run it.
Wanted to do, I want to tell you my take on it, and then have you tell me where I'm wrong, and if I'm seeing something erroneously.
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
I appreciate that you've done a lot of work in this field, and
I have.
And I think that's wonderful. All right. And I'm wondering, I don't know what, what argument the guy in the debate was using. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you my argument for subjective morality. Okay.
Let's hear it.
All right. My argument is essentially, which I love to do, by the way. All right. I do it all the time, but it's basically an argument from the definition of these words. It's what these words mean. Okay. Now, morality, all right, I see morality as a concept. I don't think a concept could ever be objective. Okay. So, my argument is that people are misclassifying morality into something it's not. You see, I look at morality as a set of personal or social standards for good or bad behavior and character. Now, is that a definition you would accept?
Yeah, the dictionary definition would be a set of principles or values that determine right from wrong or good from bad.
For a person, right? Or a society.
It's all related. Morality and ethics and virtue are all relative to the human condition. That's right.
Okay, now subjective, when I say subjective, I'm talking about something influenced or based on personal beliefs or feelings. And I don't understand how that can be objective. Just that concept of what subjective is applies to me perfectly to morality, where the word objective doesn't apply to morality, because that means something that can be evaluated based on observable, measurable facts without any personal bias or emotions or feelings coming into it. So that would be more empirical, I guess, or more scientific, I suppose. All right. But that's how I'm looking at these words. All right. So
it's a little muddied up. It's close. It's a little muddied up. It's close. I could streamline the definitions for you based on what the actual dictionary definitions are. And we can go with a lot of different definitions. We don't have to go specifically by what the dictionary says. I'm willing to work with whatever makes you comfortable. But technically, morality is a set of principles or values that determine right from wrong or good from bad. Like we talked about, ethics, morality, and virtue are specifically related to the human condition. And this is just a definition. So we don't talk about plants having morality. We don't talk about lions and tigers having morality. This is specifically related to the human condition. Subjective, you kind of were on the right track, is basically the definition specifically is stance dependent, personal opinion, dependent on a mind. These types of things are very similar to what you're talking about. So objective would be the opposite, right? Independent of people's opinions, right? So if morality is, if murder is wrong, right? If murder is wrong just because you feel like murder is wrong, that would make it subjective. If murder is wrong because it actually is true that murder is wrong, that would make it objective. It's objectively true. So for it to be objectively true, it doesn't have to be necessarily empirical per se, because there's logic. There's a logical inference to the argument, because morality is basically essentially a transcendental concept like love or something like that. We don't actually point to things like that, right? So we have a logical argument that we're making for morality. It does refer to an action. And one of the things that we should probably, a lot of people will separate ethics and morality. Most philosophers actually don't, because ultimately what you're getting to when you talk about morality is you're talking about judging an action against a standard. And the standard then becomes ethics. So really, if you separate them, you're just kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, and then you have to unpack all that bullshit. But you can do it. But morality really talks about behavior. So, the behavior of something. Well, when you say, is that behavior good or bad, that's what you're actually measuring at that point. So are we measuring it against something that's subjective? Is it bad because Lou says it's bad, or is it bad because it just is bad, right? So that's really where the argument gets sorted out there.
Okay, but you're framing it in a particular way, and I think that you certainly can come up with an objective standard for morality. Okay, so that's why on this issue, I see it as subjective, but I always say there's different ways of seeing it. And one of the reasons is I think you can come up with an objective standard, right? Like we could take a particular thing like killing people, and we could say, you know, this is objectively wrong in that it harms a particular person, and we could set that as the standard, right? So you understand, I think that the standard can be set in an objective way, but morality itself is always interpreted, and it's always something that is in a person's mind. That's how I see it. So when I'm talking about morality, I'm not talking about a particular standard for a particular thing that someone may do that's, you know, maybe good or bad. I'm talking about the actual meaning of the word. And that's why I call it definitional, you know.
Yeah, I think if you use your own definitions, if you create your own definitions for the terms, then you could really come up with any standard you want for it. You could any definition. If you actually use the definitions the way they're used in philosophy or psychology or in law, it's normal, what they call normal parlance, I guess would be the term for it, right? Then there's actually a set standard for the definitions that's already out there, which are the ones I gave you, the clinical definitions, right? But again, language is fluid. Like people can really talk, you know, identify with whatever they want. Really, they could say, look at a monkey and call it a banana if you really want to. It doesn't matter. But if you're really talking about the same thing and trying to figure something out, then we really need to figure out a standard for a definition that we both understand and we both agree with. I would recommend going with the standard that philosophers use, that psychologists use, that they base laws on, that societies are built around. You know, this would be the standard that I'm using for the word. If you're going to use just the idea that, well, we can subjectively look at morality. Well, we subjectively look at mathematics, right? Does that mean that 1 + 1 doesn't actually equal 2? Well, no, it doesn't. We could subjectively do anything we want because ultimately we are people, we are subjects. So what we're really trying to figure out is there an actual standard that makes killing wrong because it's actually wrong? And if you believe that there could be an objective standard that killing actually just is wrong, like unwanted killing, obviously, like murder or something like that, right? That's just actually wrong, then you actually believe in objective morality. If you think that killing is only wrong because we decided it's wrong, then you believe in subjective morality. So that's really where the definitions fall. So you can be either one, you know, obviously, and anybody can identify with whatever they want to.
Let's take murder, right?
Sure.
Most people agree that murder is wrong in most cases, but would you say that murder is wrong in every conceivable situation? Because I would.
I would. Yeah. I would be. And the reason is because my argument, which is not entirely unique, but it's kind of a combination of different objectivist views. But I ground the justification for morality, what it's grounded in logic. Because I ground it in logic, we know that logical contradictions can't exist, right? So if you have a subjective, if you say, let's not just take us personally out of it. Let's say person A says that murder is wrong and person B says that murder is right. Because if morality is subjective, then that's exactly what could happen, right? You have two people looking at the same situation. They can subjectively have their own opinion about it. But that's a logical contradiction. They can't actually both be right because they're two opposite propositions for the two opposite conclusions for the same proposition. So by the laws of logic, P must be either true or false. That's the third law of logic. It's called the law of the excluded middle. So you could say one of them is right and one of them is wrong, or they're both wrong, but you cannot say that they're both right because they have the opposite opinion, right? So if we ground morality in logic, then, and that's the standard. So how can we justify grounding it in logic? Well, let's think about the action of murder itself. If person A murders somebody, they are automatically the killer themselves, right? The murderer is automatically showing that they actually value life. They value their own life because they have agency and they're making a decision. So even if they don't really think of it in these terms cognitively, they're already displaying that they value life. They eat, they sleep, they get up, they walk, they make decisions, they have agency. So when they take the agency away from somebody else, they cannot say that that's morally right because they're showing that they value that agency. That's a logical contradiction. It literally makes no sense. They can do it, obviously, they can murder somebody, but they cannot call that murder morally right because they're already showing that they value the thing they're taking away from somebody else. Does that make sense? So the murder itself, the act of murder itself, to call it morally good leads to a logical contradiction. The fact that you can have two people look at the murder, one person says it's good, one person says it's wrong, that's a logical contradiction. So in both cases, however you look at that act, it's a logical contradiction if it's subjective. If you can come to a subjective truth value to it, it literally becomes a logical contradiction, and logical contradictions can't exist. So in order to make it a true or false statement, it needs to be objective. It's objectively true that murder is wrong, or it's objectively true that murder is okay. It's got to be one or the other. And we look at the murder and we say, well, what happens if we had societies that were just going around wantonly murdering people? Those societies would collapse. We know that to be true. The other issue you have is that when you have subjective morality, you cannot, this is one of the biggest arguments that people make against the subjective view, is when you look at two objectively true statements, murder takes person A off the planet, right? That's objectively true. They're gone. It's person A's family, they have a visible and visceral reaction to the loss of their family or friend. They mourn, they cry, they have funerals, they go through all these. This is objectively true. We observe this happening. You have two objectively true statements. You cannot logically bridge the two objectively true statements with a subjective claim that boo murder connects those two things. It literally makes no sense. The other problem is you have universality. So it is universally, essentially, studies have shown that it is essentially universally accepted that murder is wrong. It is illegal in every single country in the world. Both of those are objectively true statements, right? The subjective view does not account for that. If murder being wrong was just a subjective idea that people come up with, it does not logically follow that almost every single human being on the planet would subjectively agree on this. 8.5 billion people can't even agree that the Earth is an oblique spheroid, right? There are people who think the Earth is flat. It's objectively, demonstrably true that the Earth is definitely not flat, but people can think that, right? You can't get people to agree on anything almost, but people all worldwide agree almost universally that that murder is wrong. If it's subjective, that doesn't make a logical connection to that. So there's got to be an objective standard that murder just must be wrong.
Well, here's the thing. All right. Murder is considered wrong almost universally, not universally. There are people, individuals, who think murder is okay. So it's not really universal. You could say it's the majority of people, but I would offer to you there are people who think murder is okay.
Yeah, but that's a logical contradiction I already pointed out. They don't want to be murdered because they don't want to be murdered themselves. They are already proving that they value their own agency by their actions.
You're just putting something on them. You're not really.
No, they're putting it on. No, they're putting it on themselves. Their actions are showing that they value their own lives. They're already showing that. So when they say it's good to take a life away from somebody else, that's a logical contradiction. It literally makes no sense.
So let me give you this as just a thought experiment. Right?
Sure.
There's a person who has control over, let's say, a nuclear arsenal that can destroy the world. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that person is going to destroy the world, including all human beings on it. And it's illegal wherever this person is in that country. It's totally illegal to kill that person. That would be murder, illegal killing of an individual. Would it be wrong for somebody to kill that person before he destroys the world, thus murdering him? Would that murder be wrong?
No, see, I don't think that's a murder, because what you're doing is you're defending life. Then that's justice. And so that's something else people need to understand as we talk about morality, is that morality is a necessary precondition for virtue. The fundamental virtue is wisdom. You cannot have any other virtue without wisdom. Justice is a virtue. So we actually punish people who commit crimes. That's justice. It's not immoral to punish people. It's not immoral to defend yourself, right? If that person is going to blow up the world, it's perfectly reasonable to stop them. And if you have no other recourse than to use lethal force, it's their decisions that have put them in that position. It's not like you're going around just killing people because you don't know if they're going to do something bad, so we might as well just start randomly killing people. In your analogy, if I'm taking your hypothetical situation seriously, we know for a fact this person's going to obliterate everybody. Well, self-defense is perfectly moral. In fact, we have an obligation to defend ourselves because our children rely on us. My neighbor's kids rely on me. Elderly people rely on me. You know what I'm saying? I have a responsibility to live a good, virtuous life because I'm a productive member of society. If people want to blow up the world, I have a responsibility, a moral obligation to stop that person. And if lethal force is the only way to do it, then it's an unfortunate consequence, but it's a consequence of their own actions.
So there are times when murder isn't.
But that's not murder. That's actually a fallacy. I know, but that's actually a fallacy technically. I'm not trying to rake you over the coals here, but when it's called a question begging fallacy or I can't remember now the other fallacy, but when you call it murder, you start calling it murder, but you're not actually talking about murder even by definition. Murder, killing somebody who's going to blow up the world is not murder. You'll never find a dictionary.
No, murder is the unlawful killing of another person. That's what murder is.
Right. And so killing somebody who's threatening to blow, not even threatening, but in your analogy, for a fact they're going to blow up the world. That's not murder in any definition. That's not the definition of murder. So you're inserting murder in there. It's a loaded question.
It's a difficult question because if the person, let's say the person who is going to do this is operating out of Russia. All right. And in Russia, it is totally illegal to do this killing. And yet somebody decides to do that killing. He's doing an unlawful killing of another person. That definition fits perfectly into murder. And yet the murder, you agree, is not wrong in that case.
Yeah, if you're going to phrase it like that, again, that's really loading up the question. But yeah, I'll even go with your definition. That's actually not the real definition of murder. Murder is an unjustified killing. It's unlawful because law deals in justice. So in your hypothetical situation, you've literally painted an unjust scenario. And it literally makes no sense. It makes no sense because
it's attacking your universality thing. All right.
But you haven't created a logical. Your hypothetical situation is completely illogical. It makes no sense. And also the other issue is that it comes down to the logical contradiction I mentioned, is that by that person wanting to blow up the world, you can't call that good anyway. So it's got to be unjust because he's already showing that he likes his own freedom, right? He likes to live, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's suicidal, which is another issue that people run into, is that when you have brain problems with your brain, with your cognition, like there are people who have personality disorders and they commit terrible crimes, right? That's because their brain is not functioning properly. This is not based on a anomaly, right? This is based on a normal functioning brain that we understand that 1 + 1 = 2. If somebody doesn't have the normal cognition, they are not going to understand this, obviously. But go ahead.
Now, so you think there's a standard that's objective that we could look at and say this is moral and this is immoral. So we talked about murder. Are there other things you think are objectively immoral?
Yeah, it comes down to ultimately reciprocity. So we could look at things like, how do we what do we ultimately inherently value? We value agency, we value freedom, we value autonomy, right? So anything that affects or impacts those things that we inherently value, taking those away from somebody else cannot be considered morally right, because that's literally a logical contradiction. So stealing, right? It's, if I want to keep my own shit, which I do, stealing from other people, I have the ability to beat people up and take their shit from them, but I cannot logically say that's morally justified. I can do it, but I cannot call that morally justified because I value my own shit, right? So I come
But
into a logical
you're
contradiction.
determining that. Am I wrong? Aren't you determining that?
No, I'm observing it. I'm observing that people value their own stuff. Everybody values stuff. That's why they collect stuff. That's why they keep stuff. They want to have food and shelter. They need stuff. They work hard for stuff. They have there's a value people place on stuff. This is universally true that people value stuff. And a lot of stuff, there's stuff that people actually need to survive, like food and shelter. They value things. So this is just a universal truth.
Okay, now how would that go against my idea that morality for me is twofold? There's the societal morality and there's my personal morality. Okay? And my personal morality must be subjective unless we're again using different words. All right, if I have thoughts about what is moral or immoral, those thoughts must be subjective. Are you disagreeing with that?
Not at all. That's that
Okay.
you subjectively approach everything. That's right.
Okay, now the second part of that is society, right? Because I have a twofold outlook on morality. There's my personal morality, which I set, and I'm one of the people that will say that. A lot of people who argue this have a problem with saying that they set their own morality. I don't. I do set my own morality. Now, the other part of it is society. All right. Certainly, society is a group of people. So when they set a morality, like the laws of the land, you can't do this and you can't do that. That's also subjective. Am I correct on
Right.
that?
I agree with both those definitions. Absolutely.
So that's the
But here,
reason. So that's my reason for
right.
considering morality subjective. That's it.
And I understand. Yeah, no, I completely understand the argument. I completely understand why you would think why you think it appears that morality is subjective. Your observation is subjective, but whether your observation is true or false is actually what's objective. So think about it like the flat Earth example, right? Think about something like this. Well, yeah, think about flat Earth. So everyone on the planet at one point thought the Earth was flat. Everybody subjectively thought that, right? But it wasn't. It was actually, it's been a sphere the whole time. Just because people think something doesn't mean it's true. If a colorblind person looks at a red ball and they're colorblind, they think the ball is green. It doesn't mean the ball is actually green. It just means they subjectively think it's green. So you can set your own morality and you can call it morality. You can call it whatever you want. But whether it actually is moral or isn't moral, that's actually got an objective standard that is true in all cases. It's universal. So murder is universally wrong.
When you say universal, that's where you're killing me. And when you say universal, that would mean every single human being is in agreement, and that is never the case.
No. It doesn't mean they have to agree. All it means is it's a standard that is true in every situation. And how we know it's true is because of what I mentioned. So think about, I'll run it through slowly again. Do you recognize the logical contradiction of saying that murder is good, is moral? Even if you think it is, do you understand how it's a logical contradiction? Because you're actually valuing your own life, right? They're not you, the murderer, not you personally. The murderer values his own agency.
It's hard when you say things like that. All right. It's hard for me to believe that every single person values their own life. I mean, that alone doesn't seem universal. I would suggest that there are people that do not value their own life.
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. There are people who have massive depression or massive cognition problems that simply their mind is not healthy. It's not functioning properly, right? But in nature, we observe in nature that there's something called the will to survive. You throw somebody in a river that can't swim, every single person is going to start splashing around trying to get out of there, even if they don't necessarily value that they're depressed or whatever. There are people that will self-delete. It's really sad. There are people, but this is because of massive, massive trauma, emotional trauma, mental trauma. So you can't look at something that's broken and try to base an entire system on something that's broken. That literally makes no sense, right? Because they
Well,
have all this trauma. They're not acknowledged, they're not recognized. It's like looking at a colorblind person and their view. Just because their view is broken or damaged doesn't mean they're in touch or in tune with reality. So a person that doesn't actually value their own life is actually broken, which is why it's extremely rare. If you look at them, eight and a half, over
broken,
8.5,
if they're
right?
broken or not, they're still human beings. And
Yeah, they are.
universality to me would mean every single human being. That's how I take the word. All right. So
Yeah, but you've
if
got
there are
broken
human
things.
beings, if there are human beings who do not
Uh-huh.
value life and think that murder is okay, then that would not be universal. It would not apply to those broken people.
The only people who don't value their own life are people who self-delete, right? And even they understand there's a value to life. Even I would argue that you'd have to really difficult time showing that they don't really understand there is a value, but the value is not worth the pain or the struggle that they're going through. It becomes overwhelming to them. So, but there are people who are mentally broken that literally don't understand their cognitive abilities are completely broken. They just don't understand. Just like the colorblind person or the Neanderthal who thought the earth was flat, their cognitive abilities just aren't there. That doesn't mean there isn't a universal truth underlying whether or not murder is right or wrong. So you look
Right.
at the universal. Go ahead.
You've determined, tell me if I'm mistaken, you've determined a system that you can objectify morality, and that system doesn't include a God. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm an agnostic. I give the God proposition a 50-50. I don't think the God, all the philosophers, even the religious ones who believe in objective morality, and there's a lot of them, the biggest names in philosophy, Kant, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, I could go down the lists. St. Thomas Aquinas. There are a lot of Christian ones who actually believe that objective morality is a natural law. Dr. Richard Carrier, who's a famous atheist, just released a peer-reviewed paper this year on objective morality. Even he believes in it. So this is not some kind of outlier view. It's very, very, very well established. The argument should run both ways, though. So how can you bridge these gaps? How can your subjective morality account for the near universal thought that murder's wrong, or the universal fact that murder's illegal in every country, or that we've outlawed slavery in every country? How can your subjective morality make sense? It just literally makes no sense. If everything is subjective, that's it completely illogical. And how do you cover the logical contradictions between two people looking at the same situation and coming up with two completely different solutions to the same problem? That's a logical contradiction. You've got so much work ahead of you.
Well, I certainly am not going to be writing a paper on that I can prove subjective morality. All right. Definitely not going to be me. All right. I personally think it does not matter, to be honest with you, whether people think of morality as subjective or objective. I don't see any practical application, because when I talk to people and I ask them a question like that, most people look at me like I got two heads. They're like, what are you talking about? They don't even consider these questions. I mean,
Right.
I've asked people, I have, and they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So whether or not it's subjective or objective, what I do know and what I stand by is that whether it's objective or subjective, either way, the application of this is always subjective. So if you give me a perfect rule, a perfect law, a perfect morality, and there's no disagreement that this is objectively true, all right, I will tell you there will still be immorality because people will put their own take on it and they're going to have their own understanding of it. And it doesn't matter. That's my ultimate position on it. So I don't make it a big issue with me. It's just that I tend to see it as subjective because morality is something that is thought about, and things that are thought about have to be subjective. They can't be objective. They can be true, right? I mean, we could look at some, well, is it true that, you know, if we murdered so many people that would have a negative impact on society? Yeah, we could do that and we could come up with some objective answers. But the actual application of this is going to be subjective, just like the application of logic. You could argue logic is objectively true, but logic is applied by human beings, and human beings may apply it incorrectly. And that's the bottom line. So whether people believe in objective or subjective morality, I don't think it makes much of a difference. And that's kind of my position.
No, I agree with you 100%, pretty much with everything you said. I absolutely agree with you. I think that it's really a conversation for, you know, highly intellectual people to engage. I'm not throwing shade on you by this. I'm just saying it's one of those intellectual, philosophical kind of things that people get into, but it's not really going to change anything at all for the most part. The only advantage that I see to it for skeptics such as yourself is that a lot of times I hear you get into conversations with theists, and religious people, no offense, Reverend, but religious people love to throw shade on atheists and agnostics because most of you guys believe that morality is subjective. And the theist will say, well, you don't have any grounding for morality, right? And they technically are right. If everything is subjective, they're right in the sense that a person could think, like you said, whatever they want to think is perfectly moral. So slavery now is perfectly justified in their opinion. Until you ground something in some kind of objective standard, you can literally say anything is okay. The problem is what the religious people don't understand is they get their I don't know what that, yeah, what the religious people don't understand is that their divine command theory is no better. It's actually worse in a way because they are commanded to do these terrible things or say terrible things are good, like the global flood where babies are being drowned or whatever kind of nonsense that you get from different religions. So they're not in any better of a position. But they are right that if morality is just subjective, everything you said, Lou, is absolutely right. People can do whatever they want, and there's nobody to say, hey, that's probably not a good idea, other than another subjective person who's going to hopefully win the popular vote, right? But if there is a standard, it does help give some kind of like, hey, maybe we should think twice because this is going to collapse society, or these are the objectively true consequences of our actions. And our actions are subjective, but actions have objectively true consequences, right? And so these things all do get tied together. I think the best argument is based on logic. That's the best grounding for any argument. You know, the arguments for God's existence and not existence and religious truths. I think a lot of those fall apart because we lack the empirical evidence. So then it comes down to the arguments, and the arguments are always fallacious. So we use logic to tell the theist, hey, you're not coming up with a convincing argument of any kind of truth claim. You're not making a truth claim, right? So I do think that logic is a really great place to start for any argument that's going to be about something transcendental.
See, one thing, and this is way too much to get into, but I will tell you, I don't really buy transcendentalism. I'm more of I guess, a naturalist. All right. So when people talk about transcendentals, I get lost right there. Now, I'm not gonna fight about whether transcendentals exist or subjective or objective morality. I'm not gonna fight over it. but I'm just going to offer an opinion, which is what I tried to do with you, Objective.
Well, just remember that being a naturalist, I'm sorry, being a naturalist and being a materialist are not the same thing. So you sound like a materialist as opposed to a naturalist.
Tell me the difference. Tell me the difference.
So a naturalist means that all things that happen, like consciousness, for example, things we can't put a finger on, that there's a big argument about the hard problem of consciousness, love. There's things that are considered to be transcendental, and a lot of philosophers agree that there's transcendental things that exist, not spirits and ghosts and gods and all that kind of shit, but just other things, emotions and stuff. There's more of a transcendental effect of what happens with love. Now we have a physical process of neurons firing, our heartbeat increases. We can look at physical things, right? But ultimately there's this transcendental concept that when we share love with other people, the color of red, where does the color of red exist in our head? You know what I mean? There's all these problems. They call it the mind-body problem. There's all this stuff gets dug out in philosophy and science, even neuroscience. So there's the naturalist like myself says that all these things ultimately ground out in some kind of a natural explanation. The materialist says it has to be physical. So if you say there's no transcendentals, that means everything comes down to physical. Otherwise, and which makes you a materialist by definition. I mean, again, you can call yourself, anybody can call themselves whatever they want. I'm just letting you know that when you say I'm a naturalist, but I don't believe in transcendental things, by definition, that technically would then make you a materialist.
Well, I'm definitely naturalist in terms of how I'm thinking. I could change because I never bottle myself in one particular thing. If I learn something, I'm willing to change. But I don't see anything that's explainable outside of nature. So I'm a naturalist, at least until someone could show me otherwise. And the other part, the materialist, that's a difficult one for me. So I mean, I don't think I've fully thought that through, to be honest with you.
It's all minutia. It's minutia.
Objective. I had to push you on one thing that you seem to do a little bit, and that's kind of this appeal to foundation, that you have to have some kind of foundational thing. You made the point earlier that if you don't have this, then you don't have a foundation. And when you're arguing against theists or other people, that you kind of are without foundation. We have foundation problems in many branches of philosophy. We have foundation problems in the philosophy of epistemology, that we have what's the basis of knowledge, so when we get to the David Hume doing all this induction argument, that everything is just kind of induction from one thing after another, and that you create kind of, I know this because of this, and you create a network that has no ultimate grounding to, we know for this reason. There's no foundation there. So I think to say that we have to have some foundational thing, otherwise, that it doesn't have a value or anything in it, I think it's just flawed logic. And it starts to look a lot like appeal to emotion, in the same way that appeal to emotion is a logical fallacy. Saying, oh, well, we need to appeal to a foundation, it seems problematic.
Oh, that's fair. I appreciate that pushback. I don't think I said that there's no value to it, though. Maybe I misspoke. So I didn't say there's no value. I just said that ultimately what it leads to is that two people anybody could look at a society, can look at something and justify anything, which is true by the subjective view, right? That at what point, if you don't have something that you're ultimately grounding it in, what is the standard that you're coming to say, well, this probably isn't a good idea? I guess that's ultimately what I was trying to get at. I didn't mean to say there's no value in people's opinions.
No, I'm not saying that you are. I was just saying you seem to be representing the argument that if we don't have, like, if this isn't objective, then we've lost some value in the philosophical standing to say this is right or this is wrong, but we have the same problem in knowledge to say that this is true or this isn't true. We have a foundational problem already. And it doesn't mean that it strengthens your case to say, well, because we have a foundational problem, we have to make a hard line that something has to be objective ethics, that it has to be foundational. That logic doesn't follow. Just because we can't get to it doesn't mean we substitute or let's force this to be objective, because otherwise we have a foundational problem. Well, if we have a foundational problem, we have a foundational problem. That's the only point I was making on it. But I mean, I think
yeah,
a
I
lot
think
of
that's
this
fair.
is, I think a lot of what you said is problematic. I think we got a lot of philosophers that write on this subject. I was mentioning in the chat earlier, Camus. We have a lot of other philosophers that have written on this in the subject, whether it's in nihilism or whether it's in the antinatalism. We've had a lot of philosophers that argue that not life simply is better than life, and they argued it from an entirely logical position. So when you start taking the position, well, that life is valuable only if someone has brain damage or has some kind of problem with their head, do they come? No, people have come to these conclusions entirely logical. And in fact, when we read like this poetry, or what's the individual that wrote the famous "To Be or Not to Be" question, this question is something that people have struggled with at a very philosophical level for many years. So to act as if, oh, this is only brain damage or something that people would choose not to be, I just outright reject that. There are people who very logically argue that not living is better than to live, and there are strong philosophers that argue this. Now, some of these people have acted on this. We've had very few philosophers that have actually killed themselves because they've come to this conclusion, but it is something that is, you're saying just because everyone chooses, but everyone chooses. This is an evolutionary process. Everyone who chose not to be and said, well, I don't want to live, they're not in the evolutionary lineage. So this is something that natural selection is weeding out and creating a preference for those who want to live. So that's an intuition inside of the individual that says, I choose life over not life.
Hey, I want to say
I agree.
something.
I think that's why.
Hey, I just want to comment. I had a friend that I knew for quite a long time, and he fit into that unusual category. So I do think these people exist. All right. There's a friend of mine who used to argue that he would have chose not to live over living. All right. I'm the opposite. I would choose living. But I had a friend who realistically and honestly took the position that he would choose not to live over living. Now, he also said he would never off himself. He just thought that he had to endure this life to get to non-existence. Now, again, I don't think he represents the majority at all. But I think to say people like that aren't around and it's universal that people want to live. No, it's not. I don't think it's universal. So that I just want to give you an example of someone I knew that kind of fell into that category.
It's been a long time since I read it, but Kant had a whole chapter that he tried to deal with this, and he admitted some weakness in the problem where he was talking about his Kantian ethics model, because you can have the basis that, oh, well, the average person wants this, but not everyone is the average person. And there are people that may want to die. And we can write this off if you want to write it off just by saying, well, that's brain damage or that's this, that, or the other. But we've had very strong philosophy on the subject that has argued this. So I don't know that stands. And one of the stronger arguments about suffering, about the nature of suffering, was, let's consider maximums. One of the best arguments that I heard on the subject, let's consider the maximum amount of pleasure that one could feel. And let's consider the maximum amount of pain that one could feel. And then say, well, if you could experience the absolute maximum amount of pleasure that you can imagine for 5 minutes, would you endure the maximum amount of pain that you could possibly endure for 5 minutes? This was even Alex O'Connor messed with this a little bit also, kind of messing with polling on this. And the average person would say no, that they would not experience the maximum amount of pain for the maximum amount of pleasure. It's just not a 1-to-1 ratio. And even if you said, would you endure like the maximum amount of pain for twice the amount of time of the maximum pleasure, people were still like, no. So then the problem is there's a value system to pleasure and to pain that it is not a 1-to-1 ratio. It is very skewed. So then the real question is, if we're existing inside of a state that we're not content with that, is it more reasonable to simply not live? And there's a lot of philosophers that have argued that it is more reasonable just not to be.
I do have something I want to add, which you guys can hear me now, right? Okay.
Yeah,
the one thing I
hopefully
wanted to
it-
add is this is not purely an academic and intellectual exercise. So this is not just, intellectual, it's not purely intellectual. In fact, it may be very consequential. The biggest problem that we have in solving or one of the biggest problems we have in solving the alignment problem when we're talking about artificial intelligence.
I'm sorry. Can I ask who's speaking?
yeah,
Because I'm
I
not.
can't tell.
Is this Tavo?
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want to
Thank you,
make sure.
Tavo, and thank you for coming on, by the way.
Oh, sure, pleasure. This was not very planned, so this is a little spontaneous. But one of the biggest problems that we have in solving the alignment problem regarding artificial intelligence, I know AI has come up a couple times in this chat, is training AI to sort of understand moral rules. Because AI seems to be very, very good at just sort of deceiving people, at sandbagging people, at faking what its skill levels are, at passing tests to generate more resources for itself. It's a really interesting problem. So being able to articulate morality may be the linchpin in solving the alignment problem, and that may be very consequential to the very survival of humanity. So I guess I just want to make the point: this is not purely an intellectual exercise. I realize I'm backtracking a little bit a few minutes ago to the conversation, but I was part of a panel on artificial intelligence recently that I moderated, and so it's one of the interesting insights. My professional career heavily involves artificial intelligence, and this issue of trying to articulate morality in specific rules or precepts is extremely nuanced, and it's very hard to even explain morality in such a way that machine learning can sort of understand what it is that it's supposed to be doing.
I find that interesting. And I mean, if it's very difficult to figure out, I mean, wouldn't that more lean towards a subjectivity?
There's no pragmatism with AI presently unless there's an AI model that has specifically been trained to be pragmatic. And that's why I think there's always going to be an issue with AIs having moral understandings.
Well, AI is very pragmatic, actually.
To self-benefit. It's not like you're putting the AI in a situation where this has to be beneficial to its survival, because I think we come to kind of this consensus of behavior one to another because we realize that this is pragmatic. This is just like in-group growth, like when you have wolves or packs. How large can they have continuity? Can you have 5 or 6 wolves? Can they still have group cohesion? And is it more beneficial if you can have group cohesion up to 20 or 30 wolves? So, well, of course it is. But the problem is, can you keep everything in check and see value in the social cohesion? And AI is not in a place where it has to see value in social cohesion because Absolutely. It's not operating against other AIs.
Hey, Tavo, you want to weigh in on, is morality objective or subjective?
No. I mean, I think it's a very difficult question. I will say this, I think theology is sort of an easy shortcut to having objective morality. I don't know that makes it correct or the correct pathway towards morality, but I think it's an easy shortcut that gives you objective morality. But I don't know. I will say the problem of killing is tremendously complex. I know that's backtracking also. But to me, if you take a life, you've done something wrong, and you can always counterbalance that with the teleological effects. But I still think you have to admit that there's a moral infraction, there's a moral consequence from taking a life. But Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which Skeptic mentioned, is all predicated upon trying to develop a very simple proposition that humans should be alive, and that's it seems very obvious to us, but it's very, very elusive.
Well, I've always said that religion is a stepping stone.
Do you think there's a universal morality?
Probably. I'm about 60% sure that there is. Doesn't mean that I can articulate it, but.
Well, I have a different stance. I think I'm more like objective there. I believe that fire is neither good or bad. So I believe in maybe a little bit between Lou and objective, that the natural view or the stance is what nature is. It's what science shows. And I think that the morality issue is one that's overlaid on top of the basis of all existence and reality. So I don't look at one thing being bad or good in and of itself. It's simply an overlay that people put on by whatever the religion or whatever other feelings or whatever the other factors are. So I will give you different comments about this issue of morality and the things that, for example, in religious terms in the Bible, what God intended with this or that. And I think that's why people don't understand. It's because God doesn't look at things the way we do, with our moral lens exactly the same way. And so God would look at things like fire. He created fire and it burns. It cooks your food, but it can also burn your house down. Is fire good or is fire bad? And I say it's neither inherently.
And I agree with you.
What does God think? We can ask him. He's here in the chat with us.
Hello, my children. I am is here, and I am is going to tell you the answer to all your questions. First of all, Jesus is white Jesus.
Oh, Lordy.
He's white. That's the most important thing to know. No, I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, I don't know. I look at it this way. It's a matter of perspective, really. You can argue for it within different frameworks, and they can all work. If you argue from a certain framework, you can make the point that morality is subjective, and vice versa, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I always consider too is Gödel's theorem. Gödel's theorem says that. Well, I would put it this. Well, don't want to get too heavy on that, but I would say that every model, every good model, or even scientific theory, is only as good as its ability to define its limits. So every framework has a limit. There's a constraint. There's a boundary constraint. So when we start talking about really any topic, including this one, we just have to consider that we're just talking about modeling. Because from another perspective, another model, it might not hold up. So we just take things by the arguments. I was talking to objective ethics yesterday, and it's like even the argument about God. Like I'm like objective ethics. I don't really argue with people about the existence of God too much, because I'm kind of agnostic on that, right? And so but I can criticize the structure of arguments. I can say when an argument is faulty or whatever. From what objective ethics is laying out, it seems pretty consistent within his framework of foundationalism. So
Yeah.
because he's got a foundational argument, of course, it has to be consistent within that particular argument, which it is.
Mhm. Yes.
But now you get to reject foundationalism, like skeptic philosophy brought up. Like, how are you going to prove foundationalism? It's kind of like Lou, and I left a comment in your last video. Please don't take offense. I was just trying to give you some feedback, some helpful, constructive feedback. But like you had mentioned the verification principle to this theist. You had mentioned that, well, I believe that what is true is going to be what can be verified, tested, the principle of verification.
Mhm.
But then what verifies the principle of verification? If we're consistent with your statement, then it's kind of self-refuting argument. That's how self-refuting arguments work. And so that's why that Christian was able to turn it around on you like that. So you just have to kind of be careful with that kind of stuff. You know, if you're in a debate or if you're talking with these philosophical folks or phil bros or whatever you want to call them, that, you know, you kind of engage with that a little bit more. But
Well, I agree with God on this one because
of
what I
course, my
think is,
child.
I think that you're hitting on what I want to tell objective ethics is that his argument, I don't have a problem with his argument because it's done within a framework and makes sense. I don't criticize that, but I think that I'm looking at it from a different framework, and from my framework and from what I'm thinking, it doesn't do it for me, you know. And
Right,
some of
and
this
yours
stuff,
is good. You've got a good argument too because the end point is subjectivity. So I can understand that. Like for example, like everything we really know, like you know, we go back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am, or you could kind of tweak it a bit and say I experience, therefore I am. You know, I exist because I think. So anything after that's really the only thing we really know for certain, right? Is that we have a conscious experience of existing. Beyond that, everything is an inference. And inferences can be wrong because, by definition, our minds are limited. We're human minds. We're learning every day. We've been wrong about stuff all the time. We've shifted paradigms a lot throughout human history with our understanding of reality. And so we can't really consistently rely on our inference to give us truth. We can only look at the evidence and then infer based on that evidence that we experience to make some sort of truth declaration, but it would be with the caveat that until there is other evidence that may come along to refute my understanding currently. So it's tentative, right?
Mhm.
And I think any rational person should give themselves that understanding, you know, be observational about yourself, that your mind is limited. And the only thing you really know is that you're thinking, you're experiencing stuff, and that you're experiencing these inferences. And they can be illusory. You know, the other thing, too, you think about the question of free will. If we don't, you know, if you believe we don't have, you know, free will, then how are, you know, you could make the argument, then how is morality objective? If you don't have free will, then how are you being rational? Because you're just sort of an algorithm. You're just a meat machine. You're just matter in motion, atoms in motion. If that was the case, then we all have to abide by the laws of physics. Our neurons fire according to the laws of physics and everything else. And that's how we think, that's how we determine what's true, is based on that process. But that process, according to these same folks, is a blind process. It's called evolution. According to them, evolution has no mind or will or, you know, volition. It's just a process. It's just a blind process that is, you know, responding to environmental pressures. That doesn't give you truth. That just gives you survival, you know, abilities, or you adapt to certain abilities, right? And so, where do we get, if we don't have that free will because of all of that, then where are we getting this morality from? How are we in touch, or how are we accessing that objective truth out there in nature when we don't have any access to it? We only have access to our thoughts, our subjective feelings and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
those are just other arguments. People like Brooklyn Lou, I think you were kind of making that argument basically.
that's kind of summarizes my thinking on the subject. I mean, that without thoughts, we have no morality, and thoughts are subjective. So that's the crux of my argument. boiling it down to very simple one sentence.
There was an exercise for this that was made to find out if something is foundational. It's an old exercise. I went looking for it because it used David Hume's is-ought problem. Just make the is statement and try to connect it an ought statement. And if you can put another is statement in between, then it's not foundational. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about at all. I went looking for the Chat GPT to see if it knew what I was talking about.
The guillotine.
Like, I don't know if that's what it's called, a guillotine, but it's
Yep.
like, it's people do seek happiness, therefore people ought to seek happiness. And then you can insert something like seeking happiness is good, but there's always some other thing that you can like insert as like a declarative statement, but can you still get from that to an connecting the ought from the is without doing like an if statement? Like if people think or if killing is bad, that or let's say killing is bad. How do you say killing is bad to start with without saying we ought not kill? I don't know if y'all know what the hell I'm talking about at all. But this is the ideal of connecting in objectives. The problem that I have with like the statement of not killing in any given situation, like if you change this to a different entity that is doing the action, you're having a problem with it. Like, so if you say, let's say if it's an objective rule, then if it's objective, then we could apply it to animals, right? Or is it only objective for us? And then we have like a category set. So if you have something that's close to us, the closest living relative to us. So let's say a chimpanzee. Is the chimpanzee killing? Is that then, objectively wrong too? Or when does it become wrong that we as a set kill inside of our set, if that makes sense? Like if a lion killed a human or killed another lion, is that objectively bad or immoral? Does this make sense? You're having there's such a problem. I can't even begin to explain how big of a problem the more you think about it with objective ethics.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I'm trying to, because I think a lot of this was directed at me and my argument. So I'm really trying to go as far back as I can here. And I agree with a lot of everything you guys said. And I really appreciate the pushback for those who were. In regards to the guillotine, that's why I don't actually go to oughts. I believe it's all ises. I believe it's all declarative. I don't think there's propositions. I don't think we ought to do anything. I think our actions necessarily have an objective, what do you call it? Consequence. So it's all ises. Whether you ought to kill somebody or not is kind of is kind of irrelevant, removed from my argument because of what you're talking about. As far as Kant, I know Kant was brought up several times. Kant believed that morality is the objective law of reason, just as objective physical laws necessitate physical actions. Apples fall down because of gravity, right? Objective rational moral laws necessitate rational moral laws. Therefore, according to Kant, rational morality is universal and cannot change depending on circumstance. So he definitely had, his view definitely was in alignment with mine as far as the objective standard. There was something else Kant was mentioned. I'm trying to think now in regards to the free will. So if there's no free will, which I don't think there is, to me, that leads towards the objective side, because if everything is deterministic, then morality is something, and therefore morality is deterministic. If we don't have free will, then how is it subjective? So maybe I'm missing that. I've never included that into my argument.
But that is a very different. I agree with what you're saying, but that's a very different argument. If you're saying that it's all just deterministic, so it's objective in terms of being deterministic, not in terms of that there is a foundational rule. If that makes sense, that's two different things. Sam Harris argued something very similar along these lines, saying that even if everyone conceded that there's no such thing as free will in some sense, that even when we accept that, does that mean that we get away with, that we stop capital punishment? No, it doesn't mean that we stop capital punishment. Even if we know that that individual in that circumstance could not have led to any other outcome but the action that they did, we're still going to have capital punishment, because that capital punishment is still interacting with the people and deterring what actions are or are not done. But this is, at this point, this doesn't have anything to do with morality. This just has to do with chain effect.
Hey, I want to run something by all of you, just like a quick poll, because I want to test my own thinking. and have all of you intelligent people weigh in on something. Okay. We could have an objective standard for morality. I think we all would probably agree with that. There can be standards, right? We could say, look at a particular thing and say, is that good or bad for humanity? All right. But can morality be in and of itself subjective while we can still have standards that are objective? Is that possible, what I'm offering there?
Well, it doesn't
I
make
would
sense
say
to me because it seems like you could run into a logical conclusion or a logical contradiction. So if your subjective standard bumps up against the objective standard, then which is right?
No, I'm saying you could have morality. There can be an objective standard, but morality itself can be subjective, which I'm looking towards the application of, the application of this.
I kind
I
of
think
always looked at the goal setting. The goals are subjective. So one person's goal would be to wipe out the Israelites, and my goal would be to wipe out the Philistines, right? Because I'm God after all. But the moral, the way to go about that can be objectively measured. So when I say pick up the sword and go in there and kill, the donkeys, the sheep, the goats, the infants, blah blah blah. There's a way to do that, and there's an objective way to do that. They didn't have machine guns back then, so I had to order them to use, swords, right?
You're
So
muddying up the water with your satire, man.
no, well, I'm actually I can make a point though.
All
Actually,
right.
it's just basically what I'm saying is that we can subjectively make goals, but we can definitely come to objective means to achieve those goals in the best way. So, it's just an objective fact that, if I want to get to San Francisco from Florida, the fastest way to get there is by use of an airplane rather than a car. That's an objective fact, right? But the goal to want to even go to San Francisco is a subjective goal. So it's a little bit of both at play here.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can fix the problem. And the reason that I say that, I think what we do in society presently is everything that we think we can get large amount of consensus on from different people, that we can agree that this is immoral, then we can make a law on that. But when in areas where we get to where we can't make a consensus view, then we kind of take the position, let everybody do their own thing. Let everybody do their own thing, and there shouldn't be a law on this subject. So when you're talking about like drinking alcohol, for example, we might have some sets that say that this is immoral, that this is wrong. We might have religious sets that makes a very hard stand that this is immoral to drink alcohol. But we are not going to get anything resembling a consensus view on that from the populace. So what we're going to have is the majority is just going to say, look, the government needs to stay the hell out of this subject and let everybody do what they decide is right. When you do have enough of a consensus view on this that you can get the majority, then what happens is you exert the power of the government and you make prohibition laws, which was done. So I think when you can agree enough as a populace on a subject, then you can get some kind of consensus. Oh, this is ethics, but I'm not sure that we'd call this morality. This is just laws. We can say that these laws are being made for moral reasons, or for moral reasoning, just like these laws were made. I just think that that's constantly changing. If you can get enough of a group together, yeah, you can say we can outline a basic parameter and agree on things like not killing, not stealing. But even when we're talking about basic housing for people or SNAP benefits or things like that, we cannot have an agreement on what is a moral decision in this subject. There's not going to be a moral consensus on what is the moral high ground.
So
Yeah, I don't
skeptic,
think that morality and making laws and morals are necessarily intrinsically tied with one another. I think they're ultimately two separate categories. They can cross over. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that you could legislate morality per se. That's my own take on that.
well, you could have a, I mean, what I'm trying to get at, and know if I'm crazy or not. That's why I'm asking all you folks. Right? You could have a an objective standard, but like we know, the human interpretation of that standard is going to be subjective. So, like if you take something like logic, you could say it's both objective and subjective depending on its application. Am I getting somewhere here, or am I just whacked?
I think the subject of morality is going to be so close to beauty that I don't know another category to compare it with. Like, it seems like the subject of beauty, can we have massive consensus on what is considered beautiful? Yeah, I think there's a lot of consensus that a lot of people can see something. And even if you can get 90% of people to say, yes, this is beautiful, you're going to get others that no, and they're going to disagree with this. So that's why I tend to think that the subject of morality cannot be more similar to any other category than beauty. I think you can have a lot of philosophy on the subject, but you're ultimately going to get a division in ideas. Are they going to be very similar to one another? That there's a lot of cohesion, that everybody has very similar concepts? Yeah, they're going to be very similar because we have the same similar cognitive frameworks, but they're not going to be exactly the same. They're just not.
So you would say it's subjective morality then?
I would say that it depends on how you're defining morality. I think here's the thing. I do think that the subject of truth and a preference for truth is intrinsic. Like, I don't believe there's any conscious being that will prefer to be lied to over. So if you're talking about, I know, but if they want to know the truth in a given situation, but I believe this is purely pragmatic. Me and objective ethics, I think we barely touched on this subject the last time we were talking, but I think like that, whether you call it objective or not, it's universal in that there's no organism that is going to have a preference for the wrong information.
Skeptic, you never read my book, did you?
No, I guess not.
Because if you'd have read my book, you'd have learned that, I can send deception and I can harden people's hearts.
Sure.
And I'm only giving in to what they're already trying to do anyways. I'm just allowing them to follow through with all of that. So I don't think you read my book, sir.
Well, I've read that book many times. I don't think you're very consistent on the ideas.
Beauty is definitely subjective, correct? Does everyone agree on that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Did you say beauty?
Yeah, beauty.
Is it subjective or objective?
Yeah, I mean, I would think we all would agree that it's subjective, but
Well, if you value some of the studies, like with regard to symmetry and how it plays a role with human cognition across the board, stuff like that, like what Skeptic was talking about. Like there's kind of like a template that we all sort of evolutionarily go, kind of incline towards, right? And this has to do with fitness. It has to do with fitness gains in nature, right?
healthiness.
And so that's the objective part of it that objective ethics was referring to, I think, is that there are certain templates or patterns in nature that sort of supervene onto biological systems like humans, for example, or for dogs and cats, it might be totally different stuff. We can talk about a lot of things, but they're like templates that sort of like patterns in nature that sort of resonate with different systems based on what the system is. And so it'll integrate this information in order to, express it a particular way depending on what kind of system you are. So if you're a human, you're not going to like cat food. That's why I
Yeah.
created shellfish.
Yeah. The thing is,
Boobies.
I would say we prefer to look at, and I'm just supposing, most people would prefer to look at another person who is healthy versus sickly. I think that would be like most common. But when we go into beauty, we're talking about shapes and sizes and all different aspects. And that's always going to be subjective.
Well, that's the
And
asymmetry of nature. I mean, everything in nature, everything that exists is asymmetry. Otherwise, nothing would exist. So there's always going to be an incline for folks one way or the other, a little bit of difference. There's going to be some degrees of freedom. But, kind of what objective ethics was pointing to is this template in nature, this overall sort of thing. So, yeah, like, depending on, the rules of nature, which would have to do with, you know, what is it called? Nature, nurture, right? And so you can be nurtured to sort of like see females to look a certain way, like blonde hair, brown hair, um,
right.
certain shape, certain size. That is a cultural sort of
Tabula
dynamic.
rasa argument.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And then but overall, there's a certain template that we're all looking for. A feminine body, a feminine, for males, anyways, it'd be the feminine body, the feminine form. For females, it'd be the masculine form, certain height. All of this is kind of built in evolutionarily
I
to where
mean,
you may
that
not even be you may not even be conscious of that. You may have preferences that you're not even aware of, or at least why you're aware of these preferences, which kind of points to an objective feature of reality that is sort of supervening on you.
I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that that's obviously very heteronormative, right? There's plenty of examples in nature of homosexual attraction. So presumably it's
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read an article years ago about the illogical love of breast, which was such an interesting concept that we're attracted to boobs, but for logical purposes, this doesn't make any sense. But if you're talking about like evolutionary drivers, that the plump breast is likely. This is obviously, if you're attracted to plump breasts, they're going to be better at nurturing children and this, that, and the other. Is that what we're attracted to them for? Lou, you're giving me this look over here. But the ideal is that there is a preference that men throughout these lineages, they are being attracted to a plump, healthy breast. And that when they are attracted to, if they have more preference to this, being attracted to this, these women that they're selecting are making better for nursing children and whatnot, that they're able to keep the kids alive. They're able to have more milk in their breast and everything. And that the plump breast is more of a sign that they're in mating, that they're ready. It's not something that the male is thinking this through. This is just something that is being selected for. So males that are more attracted to females with more plump breasts is driving males to go to those females, and it's making them being more selected in the genetic strand. So what's being rewarded in the system is more plump breast, and what you wind up getting is now a predisposition for men that they're like, ooh, boobies, and they're attracted to them. Is this logical? It is completely illogical. There's no logical attraction here. It's a genetically rewarded behavior.
Well, so there are a few important points here. Number one, that is also still very heteronormative. I feel like we definitely need a female in this chat at this point. And number two, there is a degree of like neoteny, and like neotenous attractions in several mammals are not based on necessarily like mammary tissues. So there's other ways that this has changed throughout history. There's definitely certain cultures that So I think even these broad sweeping statements. Now there have been studies based on attractiveness describing all the sort of different types of sexual dimorphisms as if those features are more pronounced and those are more attractive. but that's not necessarily borne out well in the data. And from what I've looked at on this question specifically, I think that the data is really rather fraught on this. So when you first talked about, Lou, when you were first talking about beauty, the first thing I thought about is the Max Tegmark idea of mathematical beauty. So that's kind of the first thing my head went to, just in the interest of maybe changing the topic away from breasts. But
Don't you dare. We're going to talk about boobs a little longer.
I was saying health, primarily. I think when we look at beauty in another human being, I think health is a big factor. When we're more attracted to someone who's healthy. I think that's generally true.
But I think all of this, if I may, all of this points to, all of it is framework, isn't it? At the end of the day. So it's an argument to be made that it's all framework. And even the issue of going back to the boobs, because, we church people like to go back to boobs. The boobs,
we know.
Yeah, the boobs and the I think it was Tavo was mentioning it's a heteronormative, but really the boobs may not be just heteronormative, because the boobs have a certain symmetry, the plump ones at least, to things that are not necessarily hetero only, exclusive interests or preferences or attraction. And I'm speaking about the rear end. It's also similar in its eye appeal, I guess, to many men and of influences of all types. So I think that's where the crossover is. But in any and all cases, I still think it's all a framework that's being adopted, that we adopt throughout life, starting early with the breastfeeding, and it continues throughout life and society throughout the years.
I once inspired a book, and it says, "Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind in pleasant roe. Let her breasts satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love." So it's for a reason. I put it there. I arranged this for all you guys to get together. We could talk about boobs.
Yeah, but I mean,
we
then
have a
later
motion in the chat for a change of topic.
But then later you had Jesus talk about removing the testicles, right? If they were true followers in Matthew, right? They were to cut them off.
We don't want to talk about that right now.
Hey, Tavo.
Yes, yeah.
We had a little talk, privately in writing. Was there anything you really wanted to question me about?
I think we've touched on a lot of really interesting topics. I'm happy to get into, it seems like there was some interest in the chat of talking about whether there is a God. I realize that, if I make any arguments for that, I'm going to be in a pretty slim minority. I should also say that if you want to talk about that, I'm happy to. If you want to talk about my sort of the reason why you and I got connected was because I made a video response to Paulo Gia's video. Paulo Gia made a video of the minimal witnesses argument, which he uses to satisfy Gary Habermas's minimal facts argument. I made a video repudiating that case. So that's how you and I got connected. We have had an interesting email conversation, and we touched on two different arguments. One was the arguments for the existence of God, and the other one was the arguments for that I think are at least intriguing around Jesus. Now, if we want to switch to one of those topics, I'm happy to do that. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that I'm personally theologically not committed to any specific worldview, and I'm not. Although you call me a scholar, which is very flattering, I'm a university professor, but I'm theologically relatively uncommitted, and I also am not a theological expert. But I'm happy to give my theological hot and spicy takes.
Do you identify as a Christian?
Yeah, no, I don't actually, because enough Christians have told me that enough of the things that I say are profoundly non-Christian that I feel like to identify as a Christian. Now, it almost gets to the point where if you say, what does the word Christian mean, then it becomes meaningless because it is rather broad. But I will say that I think I'd be remiss if I identified as Christian, because then what frequently gets told to me is many of the beliefs that I have are profoundly non-Christian. Moreover, what I kind of think of my belief system as is probabilistic, right? So I think I'm sort of leaning in a certain direction based on a certain sort of probability distribution that I see in some of the things that I figured out. I will say there was, because this came up in the chat earlier, the whole no atheists in foxholes. My spiritual journey started several years after I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so, I was actually diagnosed with terminal leukemia, and I was an atheist at the time. And, and then they said, you're going to die now. And I went home essentially to die from kidney failure, which is not a terrible way to die. And, I was quite content to die, turn to darkness, and turn into complete dust. So that was just an insight that I wanted to reflect back on. Now, skeptics asking me a question, so I don't know what that means by Abrahamic. Do you mean ethnically, or
No? Do you believe in the Abrahamic God? And even to ask more questions on the subject of Christ, if we, I know that there could be more kind of Nazian categorical, this is what a Christian is, but even in the more general sense, do you believe that Jesus was divine and that there was a God that had a mission for the character?
Okay, all right, good. So I'll say so I went on a spiritual journey shortly, several years after I was diagnosed with terminal leukemia, and it turned out I wasn't going to die. So I will say that brought me to the conclusion that I did, and I've written a whole book about this, which is called Everything I Know About the Universe, and that was about the first chapter of my personal theological journey. Now, the first thing that I realized is that it doesn't really matter if there's a God, right? And let me explain why. And I can explain it with a thought experiment. If you get an email from somebody that you trust implicitly and you trust everything that they say, and they send you an email saying, "I just found out that there's a God," when you wake up the next morning, you get that email and you say, "Okay, I now believe there's a God." You wake up the next morning, will you have any new information? Will you live your life in a different way? And this gets to what Lou was saying earlier about, like, why didn't God crash my laptop? I think the question is, would that really add any information to your life? So the first thing I realized is the question of whether or not there is a God is immaterial. Now, I lean towards the idea that there is a God, but I think the first question that is spiritually invoked when you really want to ask fundamental questions about the universe and our place in it is the universe purposeful, right? And so I think that was, for me, the first question. My favorite quote about the purposefulness of the universe comes from Werner Heisenberg, who often gets undercredited for the fact that he essentially won World War II by sandbagging the German development of a nuclear weapon, probably purposefully, by the way. What he said is, if you believe in the natural sciences, then every drink that you take from the cup of the natural sciences will make you an atheist until you get to the bottom of the glass, and then you're left with the God problem. So, this is an interesting quote. So, to me, there are at least several hints that point in the direction of God, but none of them are smoking guns. To get to the point of Brooklyn Lou's questions, is there anything that's empirical, that's a posteriori, or experiential evidence that points towards the existence of God? I can point to two things, but they're relatively mundane, and one of them is somewhat easily refuted. Now, the first thing that I would point out is near-death experiences, right? So I can say with a high degree of certainty that if we conducted an experiment, which we never conduct, but if we conducted an experiment where we said, okay, you're going to be brain dead for a certain duration of time, that I can predict that you'll have a sense that there's a benevolent presence on the other side of that veil of the experience, right? I can predict that with a high degree of certainty. Okay, so and then I can also predict that there are sort of certain. I'm just looking at the chat, so that's why I get distracted every few moments. But anyways, I can also say with a certain high degree of fairly high degree of certainty that you will have a set of conclusions about whatever entity that you encounter on the other side of that veil. Now, that to me isn't like direct proof of God, but I think it's at least intriguing. I think it becomes even more intriguing with the fact that, number one, these experiences appear independent of time duration, right? Number two, these experiences are relatively independent of religious affiliation. And Number three, there's really no biological or evolutionary explanation for why we'd have these experiences. In other words, let's take things from an evolutionary biological perspective. I think you have to sort of acknowledge that, biologically, we should be, hardwired to be afraid of death. Death would be a very horrific proposition to us. So the fact that I talk to many people who have had near-death experiences who say it's the most beautiful thing, it's the most wonderful thing, and and to the point of the chat, so the problem is atheists also have near-death experiences that seem very theological when they describe them. Now, most people talk about these experiences as very ineffable, so it's hard to sort of paint this as and some people have been converted by their near-death experiences, obviously, but that's not universally true. So I don't know if I'm just answering sort of a question in the chat, but I guess my point is, I think near-death experiences are an intriguing body of literature. Now, I'm happy to stop here and answer some questions, or I'm happy to switch gears and talk about things that are more cosmological arguments for God.
I want to ask you, because it's picking up on what we were talking about in writing. You were saying that there's a difference, or maybe fundamental difference, between the supernatural things that we read about Jesus as compared to maybe the supernatural things we read about other religious figures. I threw at you the Sai Baba, right? Because the Sai Baba does have things written about him that are supernatural. And the Sai Baba, there are people alive today that speak to it and testify that they've seen the Sai Baba do miraculous things. So I'm wondering if it's persuasive to you that Jesus's supposed miracles are better than other religious figures who have done miracles.
So I mean, I think what's persuasive to me is that Satya Sai Baba. Anyway, there's two Sai Babas, but
yeah,
Satya Sai Baba,
and then there's a guy who was supposedly reincarnated.
When most people say Sai Baba, they're talking about Satya Sai Baba, and he's the one who's been debunked, who's very clearly a charlatan. So,
yeah, but there's still people who maintain that that they've seen these things. We do have eyewitness testimony. I don't believe he did a darn thing, so I'm not going to take the side that he did anything miraculous. But I don't think Jesus did anything miraculous either. So,
well, I mean, and we could talk about Sai Baba, but I think there are important qualitative differences. Number one, we'll see if history remembers Satya Sai Baba. I suspect he will remain as a footnote. Number two, there is no one who has testified to the miracles of Satya Sai Baba at the expense of their own life, right? So we know that nobody has ever been killed because they believe that Satya Sai Baba performed miracles. Number three, we have pretty good disproof. Now, there were people who were charlatans in first century Judea who were going around doing magic. They were debunked, right? Like Lucian of Samosata debunked somebody who was an early Greco-Roman magician. So I think there are important differences. Now, the other thing is I kind of like, I don't know if you've ever read the philosophies of Satya Sai Baba, but they're just not very interesting. They're just like, everyone should be happy, people should be nice to each other. To me, this is not a radical or revolutionary set of ideas. Now, my first interaction with Christianity was getting the lectures from Richard Carrier. So I started off as a mythicist, right? And then I started reading the New Testament, and I read the New Testament from the standpoint of Jesus is an interesting folk hero character. So, and that's the point where I really got sort of more intrigued, because then I said, this is actually somebody who's a very good teacher who has a lot of very consistent and yet very radical ideas. So in a time of resource scarcity, Jesus said our metric for morality is how well we serve the under-resourced. That's a radical thing to say in that circumstance. At a time of military occupation, where almost every other, pretender to the throne of savior of Judea was militarizing their population, militarizing their following, Jesus advocated for radical forgiveness. Now that's revolutionary. That's iconoclastic. even very, very skeptical minds argue that Jesus was, in terms of his morality, very cohesive and at least several centuries ahead of his time. Right? We still have people to this day, like, Gandhi. To this day is a bit of an exaggeration, but at least I was alive during the era of Gandhi. Gandhi, argued that the Sermon on the Mount is one of the greatest sets of moral precepts that has ever existed. In fact, Gandhi said, if it weren't for Christians, I myself would be a Christian. You also have people like Thomas Jefferson who
you're going on for a minute, and there's no chance to even kind of mention some of the problems with some of the things you're saying.
Oh, no, go ahead.
One of the problems, you're mentioning the Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Mount wasn't even in the book of Mark, which is the oldest of the Gospels. So we don't even see that show up until Matthew and Luke, where that shows up. So the oldest known gospel that we're talking about, 65, 70 AD, that's the Sermon on the Mount. So when you're attributing kind of these moral virtues to the character, when we didn't get this in Mark and we got this later in documents that are being majority dated by scholars to like 80 or 90 AD, this is way after Christ. So I think if you approach this with any amount of skepticism whatsoever, you cannot in any way attribute the Sermon on the Mount to the character that is Jesus. And when you're saying things like he has a continuity of this, then this dismisses things like to take up a sword, or that I say to you that if you don't hate your brother, there are things like this. So I think you're kind of painting him as an all good character, and that there's been no pushback. The most distinct thing about Jesus was that he got the power of the Roman army behind him. And when Rome accepted Jesus as a religion, he was always going to blow up, because that was the most powerful nation. If Rome would have backed the horse of Dionysus, another character that precedes him that has a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same doctrine, and people said that they felt the spirit of Dionysus come into them and move their body. If Rome would have backed that horse and put their power behind Dionysus, we may have seen a totally different outcome and be talking about a totally different character.
Yeah, and that so you've said like 5 different things, and I'm happy to like sort of refute each of them. So number 1, the set of moral precepts is probably I'm happy to begin on the moral precepts that Jesus gave in the book of Mark. Now, that's not exactly the same as the Sermon on the Mount, but there is a sort of consistent set of ethics. And most scholars who are even, neutral from a philosophical perspective will argue that the Jesus character. So if you want to say like, well, Mark made it up, and then Matthew and Luke just copied Mark, like we could even start with that. And I wouldn't be too opposed to that. But I'm still saying that the character of Jesus had these moral ideas that were good. Now, they resonate in different ways. Now, the reason I'm talking about the Sermon on the Mount is because I think that's a terse distillation of a lot of the philosophies of Jesus, and that's what Gandhi gave. So when I'm quoting Gandhi talking about the Sermon on the Mount, that's why I'm quoting that specifically. Now, let's take the second thing that you said, which was... do you want to recap the other things that you've said? And I'm fine to take them one by one.
I was snowballing. I don't remember them either.
I wanted to mention.
Can I ask for
Well, let's talk about at least
one clarification, just real quick.
Yeah,
can I ask for one clarification?
Sure.
I'm not a historian, but my understanding was that Gandhi was a Jainist. I didn't realize he was a Christian. Is there a source on that I could look into?
Gandhi was not a Christian. Gandhi was not a Christian at all.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said that he was a Christian. That's my mistake.
No,
Gandhi said, if it weren't for Christians, I would be a Christian. But what Gandhi was pointing out...
okay. Yes, I misunderstood. Yes. Okay.
He was pointing out the contradiction between the Christians who purport to follow Jesus and the values of Jesus himself.
Yeah, because of Britain and all that. That makes more sense. Okay. I was like, what happened?
Gandhi was not a Christian. Okay, No. But he expressed deep admiration for Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah,
right, one of the things.
Let's go to the last thing the skeptic said, though, really quick, because I think it is important, is that Jesus in Christianity spread rapidly because they had the backing of the Roman army. And if the Roman army had backed Dionysus, but that's flawed for 2 reasons. Number 1, the Roman Empire did indeed back paganism, to a very high degree. And in fact, right after the Roman emperor became Christian, the Roman emperor became the next Roman emperor, who was, I think, short-lived, but I don't remember who it was, but this was around the year 360 CE. That Roman emperor was pagan. and he couldn't get the direction of the Roman Empire to change. So, moreover, I think you're sort of glossing over the most rapid, most exponentially stunning increase in growth of Christianity, where Christianity did become the most successful grassroots movement in history, and that was in the ante-Nicene era. So I think you if you say, well, Christianity is only a prominent global religion because the Roman Empire took on the mantle of Christianity, I think that's at least an oversimplification. I think most historical scholars, particularly for the first 3 centuries, particularly during antiquity, would probably disagree with that. I don't know the scholarly consensus all that well, but I think it's at least a flawed conclusion to say that whatever religion the Roman emperor would have picked would have been, the majority religion that we would have with us today.
Well, if it picked a religion that was similar to what we have, that it has come away from these pagan ideals, and it did have better ideals of morality. And I won't say that it didn't, but so did Dionysius' doctrine. This is the problem. If you back a
Dionysius had terrible morals.
Well, we could look into that a little later. But
Well,
if you're talking about exponential spread as some proof, there's been comparative charts from the exponential spread of Christianity and Mormonism. That Mormonism's exponential spread rivaled with early Christianity. I mean, Mormonism didn't start too long ago, and it has spread at a very exponential rate. Does this mean that Mormonism is true? Does this is what gives validity to it because it spreads at or above? And now when you look at Muslim doctrine, you look at how much Muslim has spread across the world, and it got a 700-year later start than Christianity, and it's rivaling almost. It's not as large as Christianity, but we're talking about something that started 600 or 700 years later. So if you're talking about exponential growth being what kind of solidifies it as truth, we have the problem that Mormonism has exploded exponentially in just the last 100 years, and then you have the problem that Mormonism is if you look at its chart, I mean, it started 600 years late. If it started as far back as Christianity, it would have outgrown it.
Yeah.
However, they're all based on Christianity. Both Islam and Mormonism use Christianity, so they're riding the horse.
correct. And the other thing too, I wanted to mention
they're based
regarding
on Judaism. They're based on Judaism, not Christianity.
Yeah, I was about to say, and even that kind of relates to the Sermon on the Mount thing, because most historians think that Jesus and the Essenes, for example, drew from the same broader Jewish spiritual milieu. So rather than one borrowing directly from the other, they both, like the Essenes, have writings that sound similar to the Sermon on the Mount. Well, both of those, both the Christians and the Essenes simply, drew that or reflected a shared stream of mystical and moral renewal, within the first century Judaism. So I think that's where all that stuff came from, and it's not all that unique, because that tradition had been around long before Jesus.
Well, that's not true. So Jesus had a set of moral values that were very radical compared to Jewish moral values. Right. And
right. I'm not saying they're the same, but the basic template is the same.
I don't even know that I would necessarily agree with that. I think
Well,
Judaism.
I'm only saying what historians are saying. I'm not really saying that because I don't know, but I'm just saying that's it's something to keep in mind that historians will say that.
So let's talk about Muslim. Okay, so the Muslim tradition, it's really fascinating. But I think you have to acknowledge that Muhammad had about 60 years of active, religious conquest under his belt. He was a king. He had an army. He had an excellent plan for passing on worship to other people. He had an excellent transition plan to the next caliph, right? So he established the caliphate tradition. He was also piggybacking from Jesus, essentially saying Jesus was a philosopher too. Now, this brings up to something else that Reverend Gilberto said earlier, which is that it is, to me at least, and look, I'm not arguing that anyone here in this conversation or anyone in the chat should start worshiping Jesus. That's not anything that I'm saying. I just find this evidence very intriguing and very understated. And the reason why I like to underscore this evidence on my channel is because as an atheist and as a lifelong atheist, I was told throughout my life that the evidence is really flimsy. And then when I really dove deeper into it, I think my appreciation for the evidence is more nuanced now. Okay. But I will say this, that Reverend Gilberto brings up an interesting point, which is that Jesus is recognized, by the Muslim faith as a prophet. There's a large number of Buddhists who recognize Jesus very profoundly as a bodhisattva. Okay, that's actually a pretty significant percentage of people. There's a large number of Hindus who recognize Jesus as a yogi or an avatar, right? And in the Jewish religion, Jesus is the only named person in Jewish canon who is capable of doing magic. Now, I find that to be sort of also an intriguing proposition. Now, this is very unusual because there's no other religious figure that you find anywhere.
Moses.
What's that?
Moses.
Oh, I'm sorry. I may have not said the third criteria. The only named canonical Jewish figure who is doing magic without the authorization of God. So when I say magic, I'm not talking about miraculous acts. So
you're saying without the authorization of God, but Jesus straight out says, "I have come in my Father's name, and that I do these works in His name." So I mean, I don't
according
know
to the Jews, that's non-canonical, right?
Okay.
The Jews are saying Jesus was not doing this under the authorization of God. According to the Jews, Jesus was somebody who stole, sorcerer or magical powers. He was not performing miracles. I just think, look, there's no other religious figure that you'll hear this about. You'll never find a sect of Jews that say, Muhammad was probably a divine messenger. You'll never find that. If you talk to Buddhists, find one Buddhist in the world who says, I'm a Buddhist, but I really believe that Muhammad was the rightful prophet of God. Like, if you talk to Hindus, they're not going to say that about Muhammad either. So I find this, I'm just saying this is sort of an interesting observation that at least makes Jesus unique and makes Jesus an outlier. Now, my point is not that like I said, it's not that anyone should follow Jesus, but I do think it's intriguing enough evidence that it's important for people to at least consider reading the New Testament from the standpoint of appreciating Jesus as a philosophical teacher. Now, that's personally as far as I've gotten my own theological journey. But
Tavo, I got to ask you this, because back to the miraculous, right? The miraculous, the sorcery, the magic, right? Do you believe that Jesus did magic, sorcery, or supernatural things?
No, I don't believe in anything that's supernatural. And the reason is because if God is indeed omnipotent, omniscient, and omnitemporal, then God would not need to do any one-off interventions to create a miracle. So let me just give you an analogy. Now, I'm not saying that the Old Testament is true, but go with me on this and say the parting of the Red Sea is a true thing that happened, okay? So we can explain the parting of the Red Sea with geological and climatological things that happened, right? We could say it was a shallow marsh, and maybe there was a wind set down phenomenon, and the Red Sea was parted for that reason. Oops. I guess it's okay. So my point is this: we can explain anything in the Bible that is reported to be miraculous as an event that happened because of physical science, the physical laws. So my argument is, if you're planning everything from the beginning of the universe, right, and you're an omnitemporal, if you're outside the time frame of the universe, then nothing that you do should appear as anything other than naturalistic. So I don't believe in a God who would ever need to intervene to change the laws of nature on a moment's notice. Like, so if I say, God, make there be a sandwich right here, then I'm going to look down and there's going to be a sandwich, but that sandwich would have gotten there through other processes.
So what about the resurrection? Do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead after he was dead?
I don't personally, I go back and forth on this, but personally right now, I don't really believe in a bodily resurrection of Jesus. I think you could make the argument that there were a lot of intense visionary experiences, but if they were visionary hallucinatory experiences, they had very, very, very atypical sets of features. So in other words, we've never seen a hallucination that occurs to more than one person at a time. So I think
that's not true. We've documented even the dancing phenomenon that happened where the entire city started dancing. This has happened a few times in history that they said they couldn't control it, and there's erratic dancing that
that's not a hallucination. That's not a hallucination. That was a mass hysteria event, and that was a physical
mass
symptom.
hysteria.
Yeah.
All right.
What about Lourdes and the Catholic things?
Yeah, we could talk about Lourdes. We could talk about the Catholic tradition. Now, Lourdes is a very interesting example because that was actually the next thing that I was going to say if you wanted like more of empirical proof about, prayer and stuff. And that's just and I don't find this very interesting to talk about, but it is at least notable that all the medical healing miracles that we have good documentation on almost all come from Christianity, and almost all of those come from, or the majority of those come from the Catholic tradition. So there are healing miracles that have been documented. I'm not aware of any that have been documented through the Muslim religion or any other religions, but I'm aware of a large body of them that have been documented through Catholicism. Now, I don't use that as proof personally, but it is, again,
Now,
sort of an interesting
Pavo,
observation.
the one thing I'm trying to understand about you, and you don't believe in the resurrection. You don't identify as a Christian.
He didn't
But-
strictly say that.
What's that?
He didn't strictly say that he doesn't believe in the resurrection, that it wasn't a bodily thing. that
Oh,
would
okay.
happen.
Well, you don't believe in anything supernatural.
I say that because the Docetics kind of took a position that it
Okay.
wasn't a physical resurrection.
But you do seem to be like presenting that the Christian argument for these things is better than other religions. Am I mistaken, or is that like part of what you're doing?
I think better is a charged word. I will say that the attestations behind the miracles of Jesus are more numerous. They show up earlier and they're more robust, meaning that there's more similarity across those attestations than we find in other religions quantitatively.
So does that make you believe them, or you just not sure or agnostic on it?
I'm still sort of not sure, but I think the evidence is sort of under recognized in the lay public sphere.
So what would be an evidence that a resurrection occurred other than people said something happened? Is there anything we could look at and say, well, there's real evidence that a resurrection happened?
Well, I'm going to
I just don't even see it as, to me, believing in the resurrection is believing it like believing in the miracles of the Sai Baba, or believing that Muhammad split the moon, which is written about and is historical in the sense that people wrote about it. To me, it's the same thing. So,
Lou.
what's so
Lou.
special about these miracle claims
Lou,
of Jesus?
I think somebody has a question for you. So,
Lou,
Yeah, what is it?
God is right here in the room with you, and y'all are just talking about me like crazy. Why don't you just ask me the question?
go ahead, God, please.
Well, what is it, God? Why did you, why did you give us these special miracles that Jesus did? And do you discount or did not give these special miracles to Muhammad or Sai Baba? What is unique about these Jesus miracles?
Well, Jesus was, while he walked the earth, I gave him those, the ability to present signs and stuff like that. But, a wicked generation is always looking for a sign, right? So, I mean, it had its purpose for the time. It was an individual thing. It wasn't about trying to convince you and future generations. So I mean, a wicked generation looks for a sign. It's not important. It kind of goes back, I think, to what Tavo said, that you kind of lose. What sort of information do you think that me providing a miracle is going to really do for you? I mean, if I really provided a miracle, even one that you said, let's say you say, I want you to bring my laptop back to life. It crashed. I need it to come back. God, will you? And I bring it back to life. All you're going to say is, that was just a coincidence. I can come up with a million different ways to explain that. If I were to arrange the stars to say, Lou, God is here and I'm looking at you in the sky where everybody could see it, that ain't going to do nothing. Everybody's going to have some rational explanation that's going to make sense to them because, basically people believe not based on evidence, not based on facts. People don't believe stuff based on any of that stuff. People base their beliefs and their commitments based on how they feel. And if
Mhm.
people feel good about their beliefs, if they feel moral to pronounce their beliefs, they're not going to let anybody stop them. They're not going to let any amount of evidence, any amount of facts really change their mind, because it's a moral issue. It's like, if I know to myself, maybe I can't make the case to you that I'm God and that I exist. Just because I can't make that case to you, um, doesn't mean that, oh, I can't believe I am who I say I am, right? Like, it's the same thing with other believers in me. Like, they're going to say, look, I believe in God, and there ain't a damn thing you're going to tell me that's going to change my mind. Thank you. And, because they already know what they know, and there's nothing you can say that's going to change their mind. It's the same thing with the atheists. They have a moral prerogative to say, look, religion is bullshit. It's held us back as a species, and it all started with this God stuff, imagining sky daddies and all this kind of stuff. And let's get rid of that. Let's step it up as a species. They're on a moral crusade, just like the Christians are. So they're not going to go by the fact, because any facts that you give, look, I put UFOs in the sky every day. People take pictures of them, put them on your YouTubes, put them all on the internet. The evidence is there. They're holding congressional hearings on it. You got NASA looking at stuff. Do you think anybody gives a crap about that? No, they don't, because either you believe it or you don't. If you don't believe in UFOs, no amount of pictures on the internet is going to convince you. Like, I hear a lot of atheists say, well, show me a video, show me a photo of Jesus or God, or show me. When you show them, they always come up with an excuse to refute it. They'll always say, they'll debunk it. It's the easiest thing in the world to do.
I think that's going to start happening more now that we got Sora and all of these. We had a generation where that was kind of the thing, like, show me a video, show me a picture of this, and this would be accepted as evidence. But now we're running into generations where this is going to start becoming a very prevalent thing, that we're going to start seeing videos of Jesus walking in the heavens or on the clouds and stuff like this. It's going to start coming around a lot more. But to the
Deep
point
fakes.
that,
by the way,
yeah.
to that point, I think Christianity has a major AI slop problem. I think that's a major problem that you're touching on there. I want to dovetail on something that God said, but go ahead, Skeptic, first. And then I want to hear from Objective too, because Objective hasn't asked me any questions about this.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention something that you were talking about as far as testimony that you mentioned. We had the sighting of Mary, that thousands of people said they saw Mary, the Catholics, on the top of the building. I don't know if you're familiar with the sighting that I'm talking about.
Sure, yeah.
It has a name. Yeah. So we're talking about many people that testify to this. And as far as like testifying to the golden tablets that Joseph Smith found, we had 13 people that we have written testimony that they saw the golden tablets, that they saw them with their own eyes. Now these golden tablets disappeared.
No one said they saw them with their own eyes. They all said it was a visionary experience. So
visionary experience.
They all said they saw them with eyes closed, as though you
right.
See
You are right. A visionary experience, but that was still a visionary. That they saw them in this visionary experience, and even one of the guys that fell out with Joseph Smith later on still maintained that he still saw the tablets. So and we have more people that testifies on this than we see anyone saying that they saw Jesus. At best, with seeing Jesus, we have Paul saying, making the claim that as many as 500 people saw him. But we don't have this from any of the 500 people. We just have Paul saying that as many as 500 people saw him. So we don't have this from anybody else. And Paul, we
have it from Peter too.
From the book of Peter. This is pseudepigraphic.
No. Well, first of all, the first letter of Peter is.
Yes, it is. You look into it. It is the majority of scholars believe First Peter is pseudepigraphic.
Even very skeptical scholars, even Paulo Gia agrees that Peter had an experience with the resurrected Jesus. That Peter saw the resurrected Jesus.
Oh, you're talking about the gospel accounts of Peter's. I assume that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I think that
I'm just saying almost every atheist agrees that Peter had a visionary experience with Jesus.
I don't know the basis of that. I mean,
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah,
basis of that.
almost everyone says that Peter that Jesus as a resurrection appeared to Peter. Almost everybody says that. Bart Ehrman,
because we don't have in the original Mark, which is the oldest one, we don't even have the resurrection account. It ends with the ladies at the tomb, with it just being empty. So with the short ending version, we don't even get that. And when we're talking about Matthew and Mark, we're talking most dating it at 90 AD. So this is 40 plus years after that we're getting this account. So I'm not sure that it to any way can be considered reliable that Peter saw him. There's no writing from Peter that Peter saw them, and the best that we have is at best we have 80 to 90 years later people saying that Peter saw him. So
so skeptic, again, there's a lot of points that you make. A lot of them are very, very valid points. I'd love to have a longer conversation with you about this. I just wanted to mention something else that God said and dovetail off something that Lou said about what God said, which is that I do think it's important to note that there's almost no miracle that you can think of that would be totally unequivocally point towards God. So that's my only point that I wanted to understand. Where there was something else, and I think I lost my train of thought about that. I wanted to let Objective ask a question, but Skeptic, I'm happy to talk to you about the Mormon experience. It's fascinating. It's interesting to me, but to me, it's not very veridical for several reasons. Number one, everyone agreed that they did not physically see the golden tablets. There's not one person. They said it was as though if you close your eyes and imagine something, that's kind of what they saw. So, I mean, to me, that's not. It's an interesting testimony. I mean, I don't know that really moves the needle that much.
Very similar to Paul's testimony, though, right? I mean, he said the people that were with him saw the light, but that they didn't hear the voice, that they didn't see the man, they just saw the light. So even in that sense, we don't have anybody. But so how is Paul seeing this if it's not by vision? If it's not similar to the golden tablets?
Well, we can talk more about Paul and the fact that his experience is visionary as well. But let's go just to kind of close the loop on the Mormonism conversation, because and I do want to. I think Objective actually has a question that you wanted to ask too.
I do, and I don't mean to interject, gentlemen, because I know you guys are getting a lot of momentum here. But my wife is cooking dinner, so I only have a minute here. And Lou, thank you very much for such a great conversation about morality. By the way, all of you guys, I really appreciate your input. As far as this all goes, first of all, just for some clarity, I don't think in the miracle of Fatima, all the thousands of people saw the Mary. I think it was the son, the miracle of the son they witnessed. Mary was just the three girls, but that's just for some clarity. But as far as the, I don't get into the existence of God or not. I'm literally an agnostic about it. I give it a 50-50. So that's really for you guys to hash out. But I just wanted to make sure that I plugged my friend A's philosophy. Scott met him the other night. Last night, actually. He's really intelligent, very nice person. He's a Christian, and you really remind me of him because he has a very unorthodox view of Christianity.
Yep.
So I don't know if you've met him or spoken to him, but I would recommend you look him up. You guys might have a very interesting conversation together. It's A's philosophy. I think I left it in the comment section.
You did.
I
got a DM from you about it, but you can also Objective, like my email is on my YouTube page. So I hope we stay in touch. And if you want to email me and put me in touch with A's philosophy, I'll look him up too. But
I will look for you. I think we can have an interesting conversation about some things for sure. So I'll try and see if I can figure out how to find you on YouTube.
Yeah. Likewise, I'll hit you back too.
Tavo.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Later, Objective. Have a good one, man.
Good one.
Later, Objective.
Tavo, I got to ask you, because I'm still totally confused about where you're coming from. I really am. It's like, are you suggesting that Christianity is more valid than other religions? Would you say that?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's what I wanted to circle back, because you did mention that earlier, and I think we got distracted with other things, so I didn't get the chance to come back to you on that. But I do want to. So I want to clarify what I think. So do I think there's a God? I think probably. If there is a God who ever interacted with this realm, I think it's a pretty good chance that Jesus represented that interaction somehow. I think that's more compelling than almost every other religious figure that I've read about. But I'm definitely not 100% on that. But here's what I am compelled on. Okay. Do I think that Jesus was a sound moral teacher with very, very good moral lessons. 100%. I think that Jesus had a moral philosophy which is very compelling and very persuasive. Okay.
Why would that indicate that he did anything supernatural?
Well, I just it doesn't necessarily. I just think it's important. I think it's important to recognize. You know, Martin Luther King said this because when he was younger, and I don't want to quote Martin Luther King out of context, but he made some really interesting points when he was younger, and his point was that Christianity overemphasizes physical and biological miracles around the narrative of Jesus, and underemphasizes who Jesus was as a teacher. So I think this is where I kind of part ways with Christianity a little bit, which is that to me, it's not about did Jesus resurrect or did Jesus have a virgin birth. To me, it's all about, was Jesus a very compelling moral teacher? So to me, the morality of Jesus is almost still very unparalleled. I think there are moral lessons to be learned from the teachings of Jesus that I'm still learning about, that I'm still expanding my beliefs on. And so I would love to talk about Jesus as a moral teacher. It just, when I make videos on YouTube, I will say that when I say, hey, there's some evidence about the divinity of Jesus, and here it is, and I present it in a neutral way, I think, first of all, there is a demand for that. I think people are interested in that. But those videos get way more views than the videos that I make that are just like, here are sort of interesting teachings by Jesus.
Are you trying to persuade people that Christianity is better for the world than other religions?
I don't know about better for the world, and I don't know that I would even say better than other religions. But I am trying to persuade people that there is enough evidence there that I think that they should pick up the New Testament and read it, and read about the teachings of Jesus for themselves, and research those teachings in a broader sense.
Just so you know, I've read it many times, and I don't believe it. So there you go.
Well, might be thinking of the
which part do you
book.
not believe? Do you not believe in the morality, or do you not believe in the narrative of the miracles?
I definitely don't believe in anything miraculous, because the reason I give for that is I have no reason to believe it. Okay. And morality wise, I see Jesus saying some really cool stuff. I would call moral stuff that I would agree with. But he also said stuff that I think is suspect. You know, like when he spoke about slaves, the whole slave of Christ thing, you know, that we are to be slaves of something or somebody. That whole thing I find suspect. I don't
know which quote you're referring to, but if you, I actually,
just take the general teachings of Jesus. We are to disavow our own lives. Is that correct?
I don't think he ever
I
said.
don't think he says it quite like that, but to lay down your riches and your personal things, and to take up your cross and follow me.
What does it mean to take up your cross and follow him? What does that mean?
I think it means to follow a path of righteousness.
What's the best thing you can do for your friends? What's the best thing you can do for your friends that Jesus said?
Sacrifice for those you love. Actually, I don't think it said friends.
You die for your friends.
Does Jesus want me to obey and bow down to anything or something in this world? Does he want me to think for myself?
Not in this world. I don't think. I don't think Jesus ever says bow down to anything in this world.
Okay, so I'm perfectly fine thinking for myself.
No, not exactly. And here's the reason why. Because if you're thinking for yourself in a way that isn't humble, right? Plenty of people think for themselves, and they get led into behaviors that are morally repugnant, right? So I think what Jesus advocates is temper that, and you should temper that with humility.
I'm a very humble person. I don't need Jesus. I don't need Jesus to tell me that.
I'm so humble. I talk to the creator of the universe. And Mr. Humble God over here is super humble.
I mean, I don't get it.
What a slap in the face.
I am known by people who are friends of mine as being humble. Now, I'm not trying to say, you know, I'm the epitome of humility. I'm not the epitome of it. But when I compare
Well, do you embody the teachings of Jesus in terms of like praying for your enemies, praying for those people who hurt you?
I don't pray for anybody. Prayer is fake to me. Doesn't
Well, I mean, thinking good thoughts of your enemies, radical forgiveness. When
I
somebody cuts you
forgive
off on the road, do you
I
flip them off?
forgive people all the time, so that I do. All right.
Well, I mean, I forgive people all the time too. I don't know that that's the same as the radical forgiveness that Jesus is preaching.
Well,
How about if
I
you?
don't
I
believe
don't
in
forgive
the
people. I just don't hold
Jesus.
anything against them. I mean, there's
I mean,
nothing to forgive.
I've had
Someone
people
cuts
do
me off.
horrible things to me, and I forgive them, and I forget about it, and I move on. All right,
I don't know if
so
forgetting about something is what Jesus is talking about. I think for the forgiveness that Jesus talks about is different than just I'm just going to forget about it.
why do I have to pay attention to what Jesus taught? I've read the New Testament probably at least 20 times. I got to read it 50 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Why?
I mean, look, if you're telling me that you know better than Jesus, that your morality is superior to Jesus,
I
I
think it's
find
just as good.
I find that hard to reconcile with humility. In a time
Okay, then
in
let's
a
do it
time
like
of
this. I
adversity,
have a child that I could bring a child in here that's 6 years old, and their morality is better than Jesus. Now, is that unhumble for me to say that a child can have morality that is? I could ask questions about like slavery or about rape or things that Jesus never covers, or things about like cutting their testicles off. Is it a right to cut their testicles off in service for someone else? And this child would easily say that these things are wrong. So I think that
I don't
a
know.
small child has better morality. And I think our praise for this character having this morality is only contextual inside of that time. You can compare it and it works fine against saying, well, compared to these different religions or that religions, that it's strong. But in terms of just general morality that we have, even in the absence of religious doctrine, is it better than that? No, it is. It doesn't even
I look
compare.
around the world. Well, I look around the world and I don't see radical forgiveness. I don't see people celebrating their enemies. I see people yelling at each other. I see people being tremendously acerbic. I mean, I think we need more of the teachings of Jesus. I definitely don't see humility when I look at the world around me.
Why do I need teachings of anyone? I can't do it myself.
If you think that your teachings are just as good as the person who Albert Einstein called a luminous figure, who Gandhi called like the moral apogee, who Thomas Jefferson extolled their virtues, then I feel like that's not the same as humility.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
it's not. I'm not being
I don't know
unhumble.
you super well, Lou. You seem like a perfectly nice person. Like
Yeah, but what is it?
I
I
don't
mean,
want to
this
make
is
this
the
about you
thing.
specifically because
I
then I
mean,
have to it puts me in
why
a position where
would
I have to go
I,
know
as
you.
a man, I'm a man. Why would I, as a man, not make up my own mind about things like what is moral and what is not? Why do I have to read what an ancient Jesus said? Like, why?
Because people making their own decision about what is moral and what is not has enabled the most repugnant behaviors in history.
I think everyone.
I see people every day who justify horrific behaviors, and it's because of their belief that I should be able to think for myself. I should be able to make these decisions on my own. Yeah, I think it leads to I'm not saying that you would make those decisions badly, but I'm saying that apply that rubric universally, right? The way Immanuel Kant says in the categorical imperative, which was referenced earlier, and then you have a society that's tremendously pathological.
I see people every day in the name of God doing awful things. I see
Well, that's true too.
people.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, why would that be the better route for me, that I have to study the works that were written 2,000 years ago about an ancient man?
Look, I see
Why
Christian.
is that going to lead me to some sort of better morality? All right, I'm going to give you my standard of morality right now. All right, my standard, and I consider it subjective. So I mean, we had that discussion already, but I mean,
Well, that's the first problem, right?
I don't see it as a problem.
Well, if it's subjective, why should anyone else follow it?
I didn't say anyone should follow my morality.
Well, if
We should come to a consensus of it. That's not the same as follow my. We have a
well,
consensus. This is the
let's hear
basis
what
of
it
our
is
laws.
first.
I mean,
Let's hear
why
what it is.
why would I want everyone to follow what I do? Like, what kind of a maniac would I be? Talk about being unhumble. I'm going to tell everyone that they have to do as I say? That's crazy. All right. The fact is,
I just want to, unfortunately, like I really want to get to my more moralistic philosophies about Jesus, but I don't have a whole lot of time left. I have to probably get off pretty soon here.
all right, well,
But I want to hear what your philosophy is first.
my morality is based on, I ask myself the question, would this harm somebody or humanity, or will it help humanity? I make that decision for myself, and I do it subjectively. That's it. Now, why would I have to read about what a man 2,000 years ago had to say? A man who said or is said to be God. Why would I have to do that? I see no reason to do it.
Hellfire.
Unfortunately, I do have to go on that note. But I have written a whole book about why I like the morality of Jesus uniquely. I'm happy to come back and like share those insights.
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
I hope you see that I'm open. I'm just telling it the way it is from my perspective. All right. I don't believe because somebody said something is right 2,000 years ago or said something is wrong 2,000 years ago. That doesn't even play a role in my life, Tabo. So that's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with me. I don't care what they said. Okay.
Well, but I mean, do you see how that at least opens you up to a pathway that is not humble, that opens you up to saying, well, this is good for me, I'm going to do it? And
no, I think it opens me up to a path where I am an agent and I am autonomous and I'm making my own decisions. Yes. That doesn't mean I have to be not humble.
well, I hope we talk more about this, but I feel bad for cutting it off when I haven't had a chance to respond to a lot of the questions that are still here on the table, but I do have to go. But
Yeah,
I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Lou. And I mean, I don't want to make this personally about you, but I mean, I'll happily like recap what I think some beautiful things are about the teachings of Jesus in another conversation. And Skeptic, you've got a lot of very good, very, very valid questions. I'm happy to talk about those in the future too. God, you've been very entertaining, and you brought me into existence. And Reverend Rosato, like, again, very, very happy to be here. I hope it's been a good chat for everyone. And Lou, I hope we'll continue to talk and reach out, and maybe I'll have you on my channel for a more thorough conversation, because I feel like we're scratching the surface of the next chapter of this conversation, which I think could be very enriching.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'll see you in heaven, sir.
Okay. I wouldn't doubt it. I don't believe in the eternal conscious torment model of hell, and I think that, look, I think Jesus wants us to love God, okay? But I think the pathway for love is, to me, very clearly delineated in the New Testament to be growing knowledge. I think a deeper understanding about the universe is the pathway to love. My significant other is going to Europe tomorrow, and she just called me, so that's the reason why I have to get going. But good chat, good to chat with everyone. Thanks for having me on, Lou. I hope a lot of the stuff that I've said has been useful. I know there's some profanity that's happening in the chat right now, which is unfortunate because but I hope it's been a pleasant conversation for the rest of you.
All right.
Yep. Good talk. Later, man.
Thank you.
There is no death.
This has been really interesting to me, by the way. I think all of it's been interesting. I just have a hard time personally dealing with this a man must bow down to another man thing. All right. That whole thing I find repulsive, to be honest with you.
I don't care about your sexual preferences, Lou.
I mean, the whole thing, like, I just can't relate to it anymore. Like, I'm going to bow down at the feet of this guru, and that man, he's going to tell me everything I need to know. Or that God is going to tell me things. I literally am past it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right. Okay, so I recognize that. But I'm past it. I'm not bowing down to an ancient man. It's not happening.
Any of y'all familiar with the golden mean?
Yeah.
The golden mean ideal, it's why whenever people throw like a lot of value onto a characteristic like humility, I don't understand, like, this is you're creating this kind of as a foundational thing. Well, that's not very humble. Okay, well, why is that foundational, to be humble? In some things, there's no particular need to be humble. If there is a standard that you're completely content on, like beating a woman up or rape or this, that, or the other, well, I think that's wrong. Well, that's not very humble to say that empirically. Why the hell do I need to be humble on the subject? There's nothing particularly valuable about being humble in that situation. But I do think it's hilarious to purport that kind of humility is the standard while simultaneously people act like they talk to the creator of the universe. Oh, I have a personal relationship. I can't get a hold of the mayor in a small town, but they talk to the creator of the universe and they get messages from him and then tell us about humility. I'm sorry, I'm not buying.
Skeptic, I'm totally with you. To me, that whole thing seems so far out. It's like, I mean, I used to do it, so I could understand people can do it. But the whole thing seems so ridiculous to me. I'm talking to the creator of the universe, and he's telling me something. That whole thing seems so whack to me.
Well, being humble makes you likable, because then people can exploit you. When you're humble, you're easily to be persuaded and easily to bow down to the will of another. But on the other hand, being humble in another sense can be healthy. So there's another sense of being humble where you're just, you're realistic, put it that way.
Well, I don't consider myself, now again, I'm going to hear from people who, may not like me. They're going to say, oh, no, he's not humble at all because he thinks he knows things. And he thinks for himself, and he's really not supposed to do that. He's supposed to bow down to a man, and then he's humble. But I don't think humility has anything to do with thinking for yourself and being autonomous. I mean, those are things that are good qualities.
Well, Brooklyn, the reason that I mentioned the golden mean earlier, and God, gentlemen, he was familiar with it. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that was the ideal of the balance between two extremes. Like, so if we're talking about humility, there's a center line that is where we want to be on the subject, but too much of it this way or too little of it this way is the problem. So when we're talking about a characteristic like humility or even courage, what's the gentleman's writing on this? This was Aristotle, wasn't it? The golden mean, or this was Plato?
Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi said, "You no go left, you no go too much right. You stay in middle. Balance, balance,
Yeah.
Daniel-san."
Yeah, it was about balance. But the whole idea was, like, he gave the example of courage. Like, if you're stupidly courageous, that you just have no fear whatsoever, that this is detrimental. Whereas if you don't have any courage at all, if you're, just afraid of everything, this is problematic. So I do think there is kind of a balance between these characteristics. And the same goes with humbleness. I don't particularly want to ride the curtail of humbleness in any given subject because it may not be called for.
Well, I got someone in the chat who I'm familiar with, Dark Light. He was saying some bad words, but he was saying, why, you don't want to kiss my feet? And the truth is, no, I don't want to kiss a man's feet. I don't want to listen to a man tell me everything I need to know. I want to think for myself. I see no reason to bow down to a man. It just is like, to me, it's like a really negative thing. Like, oh, I can't think for myself. I have to bow down to this man who is going to tell me what to think. All right. I literally am too autonomous for that. I'm too much of a self-propelled unit for that. Right?
So
Now, I don't think that makes me not humble. All right. I don't think I know it all. All right. But I see no value in bowing down and begging people or gods to do something. I see no.
Do you
value in
think do you think Donald Trump could have been president by being humble?
that. No. No. And it always fascinates me that Christians think he's humble. I think they don't understand, or they just don't, and I'm not talking about anyone in this chat or anything, but generally, Christians I encounter, they think God sent Donald Trump. I mean, this is so far out to me that it's
I
like,
think that's more Christian nationalism. I think there's a lot of Christians that you'll talk to that they don't
Yeah.
like the guy.
Most
They don't.
well, I'm
Christians
talking
don't.
about Christian nationalists
Yeah.
For
are
sure, they like it.
primarily the ones I encounter. It's an evangelical type thought, all right, that God is in control and he wanted this man here for this time. And that's the mentality. And
But you
I'm
know
like,
what's
why
funny?
would he want that man here at this time? Why would he choose
You
that
know what's
man?
funny?
And
Well, what's really funny about that is these people think I'm going to take them to heaven. I'm just going to let them stew in their belief while they, you know, do their little crap. You know, let them play that way. It's all good. We'll see them in hell.
Well, my
well,
teaching today, this morning, was on if Trump, an AI investigation, if Trump is the Antichrist. If you go into that video, you'll find an interesting chart that the AI developed to compare timelines. Very interesting.
well,
And I
here's
make a
something.
comment at the end about that. But yeah.
Here's something. I follow UFC. Bryce Mitchell used to be a big Trumper. Now he says that Trump is the Antichrist. Now, to me, it doesn't matter what Bryce Mitchell says. It never has. I don't go to Bryce Mitchell to tell me if Trump is Antichrist or not. But it does show that, you know, he's a Christian, all right, and he went from Trump is sent by God to now Trump is the Antichrist. And this type of bowing down to men, whether it's, you know, well, I'm going to listen to what Bryce Mitchell says, or I'm going to listen to the pastor up the road and what he says, and it's all utter nonsense to someone like me. It doesn't, none of it makes sense. Bowing down to men does not make sense to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have kind of towed this line on the Antichrist thing. We've been hearing it even in the first term. We heard some groups kind of touting that he was probably the Antichrist because there's a proportion of he purports to be Christian, but characteristically he's not. And then when we hear him like asked about Bible verses or whatnot, well, I wouldn't want to get into my favorite verse or all because he doesn't know any Bible verses. And then the guy that wrote to Timothy, he wrote just like we normally read 2 Timothy in the Bible. He just puts the two, the Roman numerals, and then puts Timothy, right? And Trump gets up there and he says, he reads a Bible verse that they've had prepared out for him, and he says, well, in 2 Timothy it says, and everybody starts laughing at him. They're laughing at him, and he doesn't know what the hell's going on because he has never read the Bible, and now he's saying 2 Timothy, and everybody, it's obvious that this is a show. And so then he gets mad at the guy for not putting 2 Timothy, for not writing it in, right? Well, everybody knows that you say 2 Timothy. You know, your problem is you don't know anything about the Bible, and you're acting like you do. So anyway, it was funny.
No one knows more Bible than Satan himself.
Yeah.
So that's a case against him being Antichrist.
I thought Obama was supposed to be the Antichrist. Remember 2012?
Every president who comes up is usually said to be the Antichrist by some sort of Christian. Yeah. Every one that I've seen come up, Obama was definitely, I heard that a lot. He was the Antichrist.
Hey, I'm gonna have to get out of here, gentlemen. It was a great talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, and I just want to thank all of you for coming by, and everyone in my chat. I want to say I think you're more intelligent than me, and I respect your intelligence. It's amazing to me. Okay, I'm just a common sense thinker. All right, I study this stuff as needed, but all of you folks are very, very intelligent people.
I just want to thank me. I just want to thank me for you having me.
Hey, God, do you need me to bow down at your feet?
If you feel so inclined, go for it.
Good evening, all.
All right, Gilberto. Thank you, Reverend. Talk to you later.
God bless
Bye.
you.
All right. So you're heading out. So I'm going to get on out, brother.
Yes,
Thank you.
and God, I'm not bowing down to your feet. Sorry.
No, I don't do that. I don't go that way. All right, Lou. You have
All
a good
right.
one, man.
I'll see you.